Gaslighting happens when someone makes another person question their own memory, perception, or reality. It's a form of psychological manipulation that makes people feel confused and uncertain about what is real. A person using gaslighting tactics will deny facts, twist events, or insist that something never happened. This slowly breaks down the victim's confidence in their own judgment. Imagine someone clearly remembers a conversation where their friend promised to help them move on Saturday. I'd love to invite you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's incredible to think about how we're all connected through these stories and ideas. If you enjoy these thought-provoking explorations, consider subscribing to Tired Thinker so we can keep bringing you reflective narratives. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your imagination drift as we delve into the mind-boggling paradoxes and mysteries. When Saturday arrives and their friend doesn't show up, they bring it up. Instead of apologizing, the friend insists they never made that promise. They say things like, "You must be imagining that," or "You always mix things up." Over time, if this pattern continues, the person being gaslighted may start doubting their memory and question their ability to recall events correctly. In relationships, gaslighting can be subtle. A partner who regularly forgets important events may blame the other person for being too sensitive when they bring it up. If someone expresses frustration about their partner being distant, the gaslighter might respond with, "You're overreacting. I've been the same as always." When repeated, this tactic makes the person second-guess their emotions and instincts. Gaslighting isn't always direct. It often includes small, persistent denials of reality that build up over time. A manager who repeatedly promises a promotion but never delivers might tell an employee, "I never said that," when confronted. The employee remembers the conversation clearly, but is left questioning whether they misunderstood or imagined the details. This keeps the employee from pushing back because they lose trust in their own judgment. The way gaslighting works is by making the victim feel uncertain. People rely on their memories and instincts to make decisions. When someone repeatedly challenges those, it weakens their ability to stand by what they know is true. The more someone doubts themselves, the easier it becomes for the gaslighter to control them. Gaslighting often starts with small denials or distortions of the truth. A person might claim they never said something, even when confronted with proof. They may shift blame by saying, "You're too emotional," to make the other person feel unreasonable. Over time, they make the victim rely on them for what is real, rather than trusting their own experiences. Some people gaslight others intentionally to gain power or avoid accountability. Others do it without fully realizing the damage they are causing. Either way, the result is the same. The person on the receiving end starts feeling anxious and unsure of their own thoughts. In friendships, gaslighting can take the form of rewriting history. A friend who makes a hurtful joke might later say, "That never happened," or "You're imagining things." If this pattern continues, the other person may start believing they are too sensitive or even doubt their ability to remember things correctly. This gives the gaslighter control over the way events are interpreted. Work environments are not free from gaslighting either. A boss might give instructions and later deny ever saying them, making an employee feel like they are making constant mistakes. This wears down the employee's confidence, making them more dependent on their manager's version of events. It keeps them in a state of doubt where they feel unable to challenge authority. Gaslighting often works because of the trust people place in relationships. Most people assume that friends, partners, and colleagues are honest about their interactions. When someone repeatedly denies something, the natural response is to question one's own understanding instead of assuming the other person is lying. Over time, gaslighting causes emotional distress. A person experiencing it may start to feel isolated because they no longer trust their own mind. They may withdraw from conversations, avoid standing up for themselves, and become more anxious about everyday interactions. If someone repeatedly hears that they are overreacting or remembering things wrong, they may begin to believe it. One of the most damaging effects of gaslighting is how it shifts control away from the victim. Instead of trusting their own thoughts, they start relying on the gaslighter to define reality. This is especially dangerous in relationships where one person holds more power. If a partner constantly tells the other that they are imagining problems, it prevents them from addressing real issues. Gaslighting can take many forms, but it follows a consistent pattern. First, the gaslighter denies or distorts facts. Then, they dismiss the other person's feelings, making them feel irrational. Over time, they wear down the victim's confidence, making them easier to manipulate. A common tactic in gaslighting is shifting blame. If a person confronts their partner about a broken promise, the gaslighter might turn it around by saying, "You always make things up," or "You're being crazy." By attacking the other person's credibility, they avoid taking responsibility. This keeps the victim focused on proving themselves instead of questioning the gaslighter's behavior. Another way gaslighting happens is through subtle contradictions. A person might tell their friend they support them, but when their friend recalls an instance where they were hurt, they respond with, "That never happened." By doing this, the gaslighter controls the narrative, making their version of events the only acceptable reality. Some gaslighters escalate their tactics over time. What starts as small denials can turn into full manipulation. In extreme cases, a gaslighter may plant false information to make their victim even more confused. This could mean moving objects around and claiming they were never there, or telling outright lies that contradict past conversations. The goal is to make the victim feel like they cannot trust their own mind. Recognizing gaslighting is the first step in breaking free from it. People who experience it may start to notice patterns, such as feeling like they are always the one apologizing or questioning their own memory more often than usual. The more someone is aware of these tactics, the easier it becomes to push back. Setting boundaries can help minimize the effects of gaslighting. If someone constantly denies reality, it may be necessary to limit conversations or keep written records of important discussions. In work settings, this might mean sending follow-up emails summarizing agreements to prevent denial later. Another way to counter gaslighting is by seeking outside perspectives. Talking to a trusted friend or therapist can help someone see patterns of manipulation that they may not recognize on their own. Hearing validation from an outside source can restore confidence in one's own judgment. Gaslighting can make a person feel like they are losing their grip on reality, but it is possible to regain control. The key is to trust personal experiences and recognize when someone is intentionally distorting the truth. The more a person understands gaslighting, the better they can defend themselves against it. The guilt trip is a powerful way to control someone's emotions and actions by making them feel responsible for another person's feelings or situation. It works by creating a sense of obligation, shame, or remorse, pushing the target into doing something they might not have otherwise done. Parents, partners, friends, bosses, and even strangers can use guilt as a tool to manipulate. When someone says, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me," they are planting guilt in your mind to get what they want. Imagine a mother telling her son, "I carried you for 9 months, gave up my dreams for you, and now you won't even call me." The son might not have avoided his mother out of neglect, but now he feels guilty and may start calling more out of obligation rather than genuine desire. This emotional pressure creates a situation where compliance isn't a choice. It feels like a moral duty. Another example is a friend who constantly reminds you of the times they helped you. "Remember when I lent you money last year? And now you won't even come to my party?" The person might not want to attend the event for their own valid reasons, but guilt forces them to reconsider. They don't want to seem ungrateful or selfish. In relationships, guilt tripping can be even more manipulative. A partner might say, "If you really loved me, you would do this for me." This statement implies that love and obligation are the same. The target now feels pressure to prove their love by complying. Over time, this type of emotional blackmail erodes genuine affection and replaces it with fear of disappointing the other person. Workplaces are not immune to guilt-based manipulation. A boss might say, "We're all staying late tonight. I hope you're a team player." This statement frames a personal choice as a moral decision. The employee may not have planned to work late, but they don't want to seem disloyal or uncommitted. Guilt can be a more effective motivator than direct authority, because it makes people police their own behavior rather than resisting orders. The guilt trip often works because humans have an innate desire to be seen as good, reliable, and caring. When someone suggests otherwise, it triggers discomfort. Most people want to correct that image, even if it means doing something they don't want to do. Parents use guilt to control their children well into adulthood. I guess I'll just sit here alone, since nobody cares about me. This statement forces the child to choose between feeling like a bad person or complying with their parents' wishes. Many people struggle with setting boundaries because guilt makes them feel like saying no is an act of cruelty. Even strangers can use guilt to manipulate. A beggar might say, "I haven't eaten in 2 days, and you can't even spare $1." The implication is clear: you are a bad person if you refuse. Stores use guilt in marketing. Only a heartless person would pass up donating to this charity at checkout. These tactics push people into decisions they wouldn't make if they felt free to choose. Religious institutions have long used guilt as a means of control. Sermons about sin and punishment remind people that they are constantly failing, and only through compliance can they redeem themselves. If you don't give to the church, you are turning your back on God. This creates an internal battle where people feel torn between what they want and what they are being pressured to do. The cycle of guilt manipulation is often hard to break because it relies on deep-seated emotions. People who grow up in environments where guilt is a primary tool of control often struggle to recognize it as manipulation. They see it as an unavoidable part of relationships. Guilt tripping can escalate over time. If someone sees that making you feel bad works, they will continue using it. It starts with small things. You never call me anymore. Over time, it grows into larger demands. I can't believe you're not coming to my wedding after everything we've been through. The manipulator doesn't need to justify their request logically. The emotional weight of their disappointment is enough. Social media has amplified guilt-based manipulation. People post messages like, "If you really care about mental health, share this post." Now, anyone who doesn't share is indirectly labeled as uncaring. Viral campaigns use guilt to spread ideas by making people feel like refusing means they are part of the problem. One of the most extreme forms of guilt manipulation is in abusive relationships. A partner might say, "If you leave me, I'll have nothing left to live for." This statement forces the target to take responsibility for the manipulator's well-being. It places an unbearable weight on their shoulders, making them feel trapped. The guilt trip is often effective because it disguises control as care. "I just want what's best for you" is a common phrase used to make someone feel selfish for having their own desires. A mother pushing her child into a certain career might say, "I just want you to have a stable future." The child now feels guilty for disappointing their parent, even if their own dreams lie elsewhere. Breaking free from guilt manipulation requires recognizing it for what it is. The moment you feel obligated to do something against your will, ask yourself why. Are you acting out of genuine desire or because you're afraid of how someone will react? Learning to say no without feeling guilty is difficult, but it is necessary for maintaining personal freedom. People who rely on guilt as a tool of control will often escalate when they see resistance. A friend who previously guilt-tripped you into attending their events may increase the pressure by saying, "I guess I know where I stand now." This added layer of emotional punishment is meant to wear you down. The best way to counter a guilt trip is to remain firm. A simple response like, "I understand that you feel that way, but I've made my decision," prevents further debate. Deflecting the manipulation instead of engaging with it removes its power. Understanding guilt manipulation helps people set better boundaries. Not every instance of guilt is manipulation. Sometimes, people genuinely express disappointment. The difference lies in whether the person respects your right to choose. Someone saying, "I'm sad you won't make it," expresses their feelings without forcing you into action. However, someone saying, "I can't believe you're doing this to me," is attempting to control your decision. Recognizing these tactics allows you to navigate relationships with greater awareness. When someone tries to make you feel guilty, ask yourself if their emotions are your responsibility. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not emotional coercion. The silent treatment is a form of emotional manipulation where one person refuses to communicate with another to control or punish them. It creates tension, confusion, and self-doubt in the person on the receiving end. Unlike a simple cooling off period during a heated argument, the silent treatment is intentional and prolonged, designed to make the other person feel anxious and desperate for resolution. People who use the silent treatment often do so to assert power over someone else. They may want to make the other person feel guilty, insecure, or even fearful of losing the relationship. The victim of the silent treatment is left wondering what they did wrong and how they can fix it. Over time, this dynamic can wear down their self-esteem and make them more compliant in the relationship. A common scenario where the silent treatment occurs is in romantic relationships. One partner may stop responding to texts, ignore calls, or refuse to engage in conversation after a disagreement. The other partner, feeling hurt and confused, may start apologizing even if they don't believe they were at fault. This is exactly what the person giving the silent treatment wants, to make the other person take responsibility and feel unworthy of an equal say in the relationship. In the workplace, the silent treatment can be used as a tool for social exclusion or professional sabotage. A manager may ignore an employee's emails or refuse to acknowledge their contributions in meetings. A group of coworkers may deliberately leave someone out of conversations, making them feel alienated. The goal is to make the person feel isolated and powerless, pushing them to either conform or leave. Parents can also use the silent treatment to manipulate their children. A mother or father who stops speaking to their child after they express an opinion or make a mistake is sending a clear message. I will only love you if you behave the way I want. This kind of emotional neglect teaches children to suppress their emotions and prioritize pleasing others over expressing themselves honestly. The silent treatment can also show up in friendships. If one friend is upset but refuses to explain why, the other friend may feel pressured to beg for forgiveness. Over time, this behavior can create an imbalance in the friendship, where one person always walks on eggshells to avoid being shut out. This tactic is effective because it taps into a fundamental human fear, being abandoned. When someone we care about suddenly cuts off communication, our brain perceives it as a threat. It triggers anxiety and stress, making us more willing to do whatever it takes to restore the connection. The person using the silent treatment exploits this reaction to gain control. There are different degrees of the silent treatment. In some cases, it may last a few hours or a day. In more extreme situations, it can go on for weeks or even months. The longer it lasts, the more psychological damage it causes. The person being ignored begins to question their worth, replaying past conversations in their mind and trying to figure out what they did wrong. They may even start believing they deserve this treatment, which makes them easier to manipulate in the future. One way the silent treatment differs from a healthy break in communication is intent. If someone needs space to process their emotions, they will usually say so. For example, they might say, "I need some time to think, let's talk later." The silent treatment, on the other hand, is meant to make the other person suffer. It is not about self-reflection or problem-solving. It is about punishment and control. People who frequently use the silent treatment often have deep-seated insecurities or a need for dominance. They may have grown up in an environment where this behavior was modeled as a way to handle conflict. They may also lack the emotional skills to express their feelings in a healthy way, so they resort to shutting down as a form of power. On the receiving end, the person being ignored may react in different ways. Some may try harder to gain the other person's approval, apologizing excessively and changing their behavior to avoid conflict. Others may become resentful and withdraw emotionally, leading to a breakdown in trust and intimacy. If this pattern continues over time, it can lead to long-term emotional distress, including anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. Breaking free from the silent treatment requires recognizing it for what it is, an act of manipulation. If someone is using this tactic against you, it is important to set boundaries. Instead of chasing after their approval, take a step back and acknowledge that their behavior is unfair. If possible, communicate your feelings clearly. "I understand you are upset, but ignoring me is not a healthy way to resolve this. This shifts the responsibility back to them and makes it clear that you will not tolerate emotional blackmail. In some cases, the person giving the silent treatment may refuse to change. If this happens repeatedly, it may be necessary to reconsider the relationship. No one deserves to be ignored or emotionally punished for speaking their mind. Healthy relationships are built on open communication, mutual respect, and the ability to work through conflicts without resorting to manipulation. For those who use the silent treatment as a defense mechanism, it is important to develop healthier ways to express emotions. This may involve learning to communicate needs more directly, seeking therapy, or practicing emotional regulation techniques. Ignoring someone may feel like a way to protect oneself in the moment, but it ultimately damages relationships and creates long-term emotional distance. The silent treatment is a powerful psychological tool because it forces the other person into a state of emotional uncertainty. It plays on their fears and insecurities, making them question their worth and pushing them to seek validation. Understanding this tactic is the first step in breaking free from its hold. Whether in romantic relationships, friendships, family dynamics, or the workplace, recognizing when someone is using silence as a weapon allows you to respond in a way that protects your emotional well-being. Triangulation happens when someone brings a third person into a situation to create tension, competition, or uncertainty. It's a common tactic in manipulation, especially in relationships, workplaces, and social circles. The goal is to make the target feel insecure or uncertain by introducing another person as a comparison or a supposed ally. A classic example is in romantic relationships. A person might talk about how attractive or interesting someone else is to make their partner jealous. They might say, "Oh, my coworker is so funny, we get along so well," while leaving out key details that would provide reassurance. This creates a sense of rivalry and insecurity in their partner. The partner starts to wonder if they measure up or if they are being replaced. This pushes them to seek validation from the manipulator, making them easier to control. It also happens in families. A parent might compare one child to another by saying, "Your brother always gets good grades. Why can't you be more like him?" This makes the child feel unworthy, insecure, and desperate for approval. Instead of fostering a healthy sense of self-worth, the child grows up constantly competing for love and validation. Over time, this can damage self-esteem and create resentment between siblings. In workplaces, triangulation is a tool for controlling employees and creating division. A boss might tell one worker that another is more productive, implying that their job is at risk. This creates unnecessary competition and makes employees more anxious and compliant. Instead of focusing on doing their best work, they waste energy trying to prove themselves. A manipulative coworker might also use triangulation by pretending to be on good terms with the boss while undermining their peers behind the scenes. Friendships are not immune to this tactic. A person might play two friends against each other by spreading rumors or selectively sharing information. They might tell one friend, "I think Sarah is upset with you, but I don't want to get involved," planting doubt while avoiding responsibility. Now, the targeted friend questions their relationship with Sarah, becoming insecure and defensive. Meanwhile, the manipulator remains in control, acting as the middleman and holding power over both friends. Triangulation also appears in toxic leadership. A manager might encourage employees to report on each other, creating an atmosphere of mistrust. This keeps workers divided and makes it harder for them to push back against unfair treatment. If employees don't trust each other, they are less likely to unite against the leader. The most dangerous aspect of triangulation is that it shifts the focus away from the manipulator. Instead of confronting the person creating the problem, the target becomes preoccupied with the third party. In relationships, this means trying to win back the manipulator instead of recognizing the unhealthy dynamic. In workplaces, it means competing with colleagues instead of addressing poor leadership. In families, it means resenting siblings rather than questioning why the parent is pitting them against each other. Someone using triangulation rarely admits what they are doing. They frame their actions as innocent observations or friendly advice. "I'm just being honest," they might say. or "I thought you should know." This keeps them from looking like the villain while still creating tension. There are subtle ways this manipulation appears in everyday life. A teacher might favor one student and use them as an example to criticize others. A coach might suggest that another player is getting more playing time because they work harder, rather than because of skill or strategy. A politician might create divisions by constantly comparing groups to each other, making people feel like they must compete for limited resources. For the target, triangulation creates anxiety, doubt, and a sense of never being good enough. It fosters insecurity and forces people to seek validation from the manipulator. Over time, this can break down self-confidence and make the target easier to control. The best way to recognize triangulation is to ask a simple question. Why is this person bringing up a third party in this conversation? If there is no good reason, manipulation may be at play. Healthy communication happens directly, not through comparisons or implied threats. Recognizing triangulation is the first step to breaking free from it. If a partner, boss, friend, or family member is using this tactic, the best response is to disengage. Refusing to compete, setting boundaries, and addressing the behavior directly can weaken the manipulator's control. Instead of getting caught in the cycle of jealousy, insecurity, or rivalry, stepping back allows for a clearer perspective. In any environment where triangulation is common, the key is to maintain self-worth and trust in direct communication. Manipulators rely on confusion and competition, but once their tactics are exposed, their power diminishes. The door-in-the-face technique works by making a large request first, expecting it to be refused, then following up with a smaller request that seems more reasonable. The contrast between the two makes the second request feel like a concession, increasing the likelihood of compliance. Imagine someone asking for a large donation, like $500. Most people would decline. But if they follow up with a smaller request, like $20, it feels more manageable in comparison. The person being asked might feel guilty for refusing the first request and be more likely to agree to the second. This technique relies on the psychological principle of reciprocity. When someone rejects a big request, they subconsciously feel like they are letting the other person down. When a smaller request follows, it seems like a fair compromise. People don't want to seem unreasonable, so they agree to the second request to balance the situation. In retail settings, a salesperson might suggest an expensive item first, knowing the customer will likely decline. Then they suggest a cheaper alternative. The customer, already primed to say no, sees the second item as a better deal and agrees to buy it. This technique is also common in negotiations. A seller might initially set a high price, expecting the buyer to reject it. When they lower the price slightly, it appears like a reasonable compromise, even if the price is still higher than the buyer originally wanted. Another common use of this technique is in fundraising. A charity worker might ask someone to commit to volunteering for 10 hours a week. When the person refuses, they follow up by asking for a one-time donation instead. Since the second request is much smaller, it feels easier to accept. Parents sometimes use this strategy with children. If a child refuses to do a big chore, like cleaning the entire house, the parent might follow up with a request to clean just one room. The child, already feeling like they rejected the first request, may be more likely to agree to the smaller one. This method also works in social situations. Someone might ask a friend for a big favor, like helping them move all weekend. When the friend declines, they ask if they could just help for an hour instead. The friend, feeling guilty for saying no the first time, may agree to the smaller favor. One of the key reasons this works is because people want to maintain a positive self-image. Refusing both requests makes them feel unhelpful or selfish. Agreeing to the second request allows them to feel like they are being cooperative without committing too much. This technique is also used in politics and activism. A group might ask people to sign a long-term commitment, knowing most will decline. Then, they follow up with a request for a simple petition signature or a small donation. The second request feels easier, making people more likely to comply. Marketers often combine this with the foot-in-the-door technique, which works in the opposite way. Instead of starting big and going small, they start with a small request and build up to a larger one. By using both techniques together, they increase the chances of getting people to agree. The door-in-the-face technique can also appear in customer service interactions. If a customer refuses an expensive warranty, the representative might offer a cheaper one instead. Since the customer has already refused the first offer, they may feel more inclined to accept the second. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon extensively. In one experiment, researchers asked people to spend 2 hours a week volunteering for 2 years. Most refused. But when they followed up by asking for just 1 day of volunteering, compliance rates skyrocketed. The initial big request made the smaller ones seem much more reasonable. This technique also plays a role in job negotiations. An employer might initially offer a low salary, expecting the candidate to push back. When they raise the offer slightly, it seems like a fair compromise, even if the final salary is still lower than the candidate originally wanted. In personal relationships, people might use this strategy without even realizing it. A partner might suggest a long vacation, knowing it's unrealistic. When the other person declines, they suggest a weekend getaway instead. The second request seems more reasonable, making it harder to refuse. Teachers and educators can also use this strategy to encourage students to participate. If a teacher asks a student to write a 10-page paper and they refuse, they might follow up with a request for a 5-page paper instead. The student, feeling like they already rejected one request, may be more likely to accept the second. The door-in-the-face technique works because people feel obligated to meet others halfway. If they say no to something big, they feel pressure to say yes to something smaller. This makes it an effective tool for persuasion in many different areas of life. Mirroring happens when one person copies another person's body language, speech patterns, or behaviors. This can happen naturally when people get along. It can also be done on purpose to build rapport and gain trust. People tend to feel more comfortable around others who seem like them. This trick works because humans are wired to trust and connect with those who appear familiar. Imagine you are talking to someone at a party. You cross your arms, and a few moments later, they do the same. You lean forward slightly, and soon they do too. You start speaking at a slower pace, and they match your speed. You may not notice it, but mirroring is happening. When done subtly, it makes the conversation flow better. It makes people feel like they are on the same page. This can be helpful in many situations, from job interviews to negotiations. In a business setting, mirroring can make people more likely to agree with you. A salesperson may use it to make a potential buyer feel at ease. If the customer speaks softly, the salesperson might lower their voice as well. If the customer sits back in their chair, the salesperson might do the same. These small actions create a sense of connection. The customer may not be able to explain why, but they will feel more comfortable. This increases the chances of a sale. In social situations, mirroring helps build friendships. When two people mirror each other, they feel a sense of unity. This often happens naturally among close friends. When one person laughs, the other laughs too. When one tilts their head, the other does as well. If done too obviously, though, it can seem unnatural. If someone notices they are being mirrored, they may feel uncomfortable or manipulated. Mirroring also plays a role in dating. When two people are attracted to each other, they often mimic each other's movements without realizing it. If one person picks up a drink, the other might do the same. If one touches their face, the other may follow. This creates a subconscious bond. A person using mirroring deliberately can make themselves appear more attractive and interesting. If they time their mirroring right, they can create a feeling of deep connection. Mirroring works because of something called the chameleon effect. This refers to the natural human tendency to copy others. Studies show that when people mirror each other, they like each other more. This is true even if they don't realize it is happening. The brain associates similarity with safety and trust. That is why mirroring is such a powerful tool. This technique is also used in interviews. If a candidate subtly mirrors the interviewer's posture and tone, the interviewer may feel more at ease. If the interviewer leans forward, the candidate might do the same. If the interviewer speaks with excitement, the candidate can match their energy. These small adjustments can help create a sense of familiarity. Interviewers often favor candidates who feel like a natural fit. Mirroring increases the chances of making that impression. Negotiators use mirroring to get better deals. If one person is sitting upright and speaking slowly, the other might do the same. If one uses formal language, the other follows. This makes the negotiation smoother. It makes the other party feel like they are dealing with someone who understands them. People tend to agree with those they feel are similar. A skilled negotiator can use this to their advantage. This tactic is not limited to body language. It also applies to speech and writing. If someone uses short sentences, mirroring that style makes them feel more comfortable. If they use formal words, responding in the same way builds a sense of alignment. If they use humor, a lighthearted response creates connection. Even in emails or text messages, mirroring the other person's style can make communication more effective. A darker side of mirroring exists. Some people use it to manipulate. A con artist might mirror a victim's behavior to gain their trust. They might copy their speech patterns and interests to seem like a perfect match. Once the victim feels connected, the manipulator can take advantage of them. This happens in scams, abusive relationships, and even cults. A manipulative person mirrors their target to lower their defenses. Once trust is built, they can influence them more easily. Some job candidates use mirroring to appear more qualified. If an interviewer speaks with confidence, the candidate mirrors that tone. If the interviewer focuses on teamwork, the candidate emphasizes their team experience. This makes them seem like the perfect fit. Employers who are aware of this trick look for other signs of qualification. They know that mirroring alone does not prove ability. A skilled interrogator may use mirroring to get more information from a suspect. They match the suspect's tone and posture to create a false sense of comfort. The suspect may feel like they are talking to a friend. This can make them more likely to share details they would normally keep hidden. Law enforcement officers use this technique carefully, knowing that trust leads to confessions. A common mistake when using mirroring is being too obvious. If someone notices they are being copied, they may feel uncomfortable. It should feel natural, not forced. The best way to mirror is to do it subtly. Waiting a few seconds before copying a movement makes it less noticeable. Matching energy rather than exact actions keeps it from feeling robotic. Mirroring is most effective when combined with other trust-building techniques. Active listening makes it more powerful. Nodding, making eye contact, and responding thoughtfully add to the effect. People trust those who seem to understand them. Mirroring, when done right, enhances this feeling. This trick is often used in leadership. A good leader knows how to make their team feel understood. If an employee is frustrated, the leader matches their serious tone. If the employee is excited, the leader shares that energy. This creates a bond. It makes people feel heard. A leader who mirrors their team's emotions builds stronger connections. Parents use mirroring with children. When a child is upset, a parent who mirrors their concern makes them feel understood. If a child is excited, matching that excitement strengthens the bond. This builds trust between parents and children. It helps children feel safe and valued. Mirroring is a tool that appears in many areas of life. It can be used for good or bad. It helps build trust, but it can also be used for manipulation. The key to using it well is awareness. If used honestly, it creates stronger connections. If used deceptively, it can be harmful. Understanding mirroring helps in both using and recognizing it. Love bombing happens when someone showers another person with intense affection, gifts, and attention to gain control over them. It feels overwhelming, fast, and almost too good to be true. At first, it seems like an ideal romance, but the purpose is to lower defenses and create emotional dependence. The person on the receiving end feels special, adored, and wanted. They believe they have found someone who truly understands them. But beneath the grand gestures and endless compliments, there is an agenda. The one doing the love bombing wants control. A common example happens in toxic relationships. A person meets someone new, and right away, this new partner is texting all day, calling every night, planning future vacations, and saying things like, "I can't believe we just met, but I already know you're the one." The pace is fast. Dates are extravagant. Every word is laced with deep emotion. Flowers arrive at work. Surprise gifts show up at the door. Friends might say, "Wow, they really like you," but something feels off. The key to love bombing is that it doesn't allow the other person time to think. It creates an emotional high. The person being pursued stops questioning the pace because they feel wanted in a way they never have before. They start believing they have found something rare, something they need to hold on to. They begin adjusting their own schedule to match the energy of their new partner. They answer every text right away. They cancel plans to spend more time together. They get hooked. Then, the shift happens. Once the person doing the love bombing feels in control, the intensity fades. The grand gestures stop. The sweet words slow down. The person who once sent long messages about how perfect everything is now takes hours or days to respond. They make excuses. "I've just been busy," or "I need some space." The person on the receiving end starts feeling anxious. They wonder what changed. They begin chasing the feeling they once had, trying to bring back the love that was so freely given before. This is where control sets in. The one who love bombed now decides when to give affection and when to withhold it. The person who was love bombed now works for attention that used to come easily. Love bombing often happens in emotionally abusive relationships. It hooks people in before they see red flags. If the relationship started with normal levels of affection, the one being pursued would have time to notice issues. But with love bombing, those warning signs get buried under grand displays of love. The brain forms a connection between this person and intense happiness, making it harder to leave when things start to shift. It also happens in friendships. A new friend enters someone's life, and suddenly they are inseparable. This friend complements everything, supports every decision, and makes the other person feel like they have finally found someone who gets them. But later, this same friend begins to pull back or make passive-aggressive comments. They may guilt trip or act cold. The love-bombed person, now used to constant validation, starts changing their behavior to regain approval. The dynamic turns manipulative. Cult leaders and manipulative organizations use love bombing too. New members are welcomed with overwhelming warmth. They are told they are special, that they belong, that they have found a new family. The intensity makes them drop their guard. Once invested, they may face pressure, demands, or guilt, but by then they are emotionally hooked. The initial love bombing makes it difficult to leave, even when things take a darker turn. This tactic is also common in workplace settings. A new employee may be praised constantly, promised fast promotions, and made to feel like a key part of the team. They start working extra hours, going beyond their job description, and investing their emotions in the company. But once they are deeply committed, the praise stops. The expectations increase. The boss who once celebrated their efforts now barely acknowledges them. The employee, attached to the approval they once received, works harder, hoping to regain the validation. This is another form of control. Love bombing works because it triggers a chemical response in the brain. The sudden affection releases dopamine, creating a sense of euphoria. It feels like a high, and once a person is used to it, the withdrawal hits hard. When the affection is removed, the brain craves the rush again. This is why people struggle to leave toxic relationships that started with intense love bombing. The logical mind might recognize the manipulation, but the emotional side clings to the early version of the relationship, believing it can return. A healthy relationship, friendship, or work environment does not rely on extreme highs followed by cold withdrawal. Genuine connections build at a natural pace. There is no need to rush, overwhelm, or manipulate emotions. Love bombing creates a false reality, making it difficult to see the truth beneath the illusion. Recognizing love bombing requires stepping back from the emotional intensity. If a relationship feels too good to be true early on, if affection comes in overwhelming waves, if future promises are made too soon, those are warning signs. A person should ask themselves if they are being given time to think, if they feel pressure to match the same level of enthusiasm, or if they sense an urgency that doesn't feel natural. These are clues that the connection may not be as genuine as it seems. Setting boundaries is the best way to prevent falling into a love bombing trap. Slowing things down, maintaining personal space, and observing how someone reacts to no can reveal a lot. A healthy person will respect boundaries and let relationships unfold naturally. A manipulator will push, guilt, or try to maintain control. The ability to say, "This is moving too fast for me," or "I need time to process," can stop a love bomber in their tracks. Love bombing creates dependency, but once recognized, it loses its power. The key is understanding that real love, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, does not rely on extremes. It does not need to manipulate emotions to gain control. False scarcity is a tactic used to make something seem rare or limited to increase its perceived value. People are more likely to want something if they believe they might not get it. This plays on a basic fear of missing out. Marketers, salespeople, and even manipulative individuals use this technique to create urgency. They know that when people feel pressured, they make faster decisions and often act against their best interests. Consider an online store that says, "Only 2 left in stock." You might not have been in a hurry to buy, but now you feel the pressure. You don't want to miss out. The truth is, the store might have plenty of stock, but they want you to think supplies are running low. Airlines and hotel booking sites use a similar strategy. You've probably seen messages like, "Only 1 seat left at this price," or 10 people are looking at this hotel right now. These claims push you to act fast without thinking it through. Sometimes they're true, but often they're designed to rush you into making a decision. This tactic works because of how people react to scarcity. When something is hard to get, we assume it must be valuable. Think about concert tickets. If a show sells out quickly, people suddenly want tickets even more. Resellers take advantage of this by buying up tickets and selling them for much higher prices. The same thing happens with limited edition sneakers, gaming consoles, or high-end watches. Companies manufacture a sense of exclusivity by producing fewer items than they know will sell. This way, demand stays high and people are willing to pay more. Manufacturers sometimes use false scarcity to make products seem more special. Luxury brands do this all the time. A designer handbag might be marketed as part of a limited collection, even though the company could produce more if it wanted to. By restricting supply, they create artificial demand. Customers feel privileged to own something rare, even if it's only rare by design. The same goes for restaurants that claim to have secret menus or off-menu items. These aren't really secret, but the idea that only a few people know about them makes them more desirable. False scarcity also appears in relationships and social situations. A manipulative person might act like their time is extremely valuable to make you chase their attention. They may pretend to be too busy to meet up or respond slowly to messages, making you feel like you need to work harder for their approval. This can create an unhealthy dynamic where one person holds all the power while the other keeps trying to prove their worth. In workplaces, managers sometimes use false scarcity to control employees. A company might say there are only a few promotions available, even if they could promote more people. This makes employees compete against each other and work harder. Job postings sometimes claim, "We're reviewing candidates immediately. Apply now," when they actually have no deadline. The goal is to make job seekers feel pressured so they don't take the time to consider other options. Subscription services and online courses also use false scarcity to increase sales. You've probably seen messages like, "Offer expires at midnight," or "Only available for the next 24 hours." In many cases, if you refresh the page or visit the site later, the offer is still there. Companies know that people are more likely to buy if they believe they have a limited time to act. Retailers often create a sense of urgency through seasonal sales. Black Friday and Cyber Monday are good examples. Stores push massive discounts for a limited time, making people feel like they have to buy now or miss out forever. But in reality, these sales often continue in different forms throughout the holiday season. Some stores even raise their prices before the sale so they can advertise bigger discounts. Another common example is restaurants or food brands claiming a product is only available for a limited time. Think of the McRib at McDonald's. The company brings it back every so often, but only for a short time. This makes people rush to get it while they can. If it were available all year, it probably wouldn't be as popular. False scarcity is also used in politics and social movements. Leaders and organizations sometimes warn that time is running out to take action. This might be about donating money, signing a petition, or supporting a cause. The sense of urgency can be real, but in some cases, it's exaggerated to get people to act immediately instead of thinking carefully. People who understand false scarcity can resist it. The key is to slow down and ask questions. Is the item really rare, or is someone just saying that? Will this opportunity actually disappear, or is it just a marketing trick? Taking a moment to analyze the situation can prevent impulsive decisions. Understanding this tactic also helps in negotiations. If a seller claims this deal is only available today, you can test their bluff by walking away. If they still want your business, they might extend the offer. When shopping online, looking at reviews or checking multiple sources can reveal whether a product is actually scarce. Some websites even track price history, showing whether a discount is real or just a trick. Avoiding false scarcity also means recognizing emotional manipulation. If someone is making you feel like you have to act fast to keep their approval, step back. Healthy relationships don't rely on pressure or artificial limits. If a company or employer is using this tactic, consider whether they really have your best interests in mind. Companies and individuals will keep using false scarcity because it works. It plays on deep psychological triggers that make people want what they think they can't have. But knowing the trick makes it easier to resist. Instead of falling for the illusion of rarity, take a moment to think. That moment can be the difference between a smart decision and a rushed mistake. Reverse psychology is a technique that gets people to do what you want by telling them to do the opposite. It works because people like to feel in control and make their own choices. When you suggest they do something different from what you actually want, they may push back and do what you intended all along. This technique is often used on children, stubborn individuals, and even in negotiations. For example, a parent might tell a child, "I bet you can't clean your room in 10 minutes. The child, eager to prove the parent wrong, rushes to clean up. The parent's real goal was to get the child to tidy up, but they framed it as a challenge, making the child feel like it was their own decision. In another scenario, a teacher might say, "I don't expect everyone to finish this homework early, but those who do will probably understand the next lesson much better." Some students may take this as a challenge and complete the work ahead of time to prove themselves. This method plays on a psychological reaction called reactance. When people feel that their freedom to choose is being restricted, they resist and often do the opposite of what they are told. This is especially common in teenagers, who are at an age where asserting independence is important. A teenager told, "You're probably not mature enough to handle this responsibility," may immediately try to prove that they are, simply to contradict the statement. The parent's intention is to push them toward taking responsibility, and by making it seem like an unattainable challenge, they trigger the teenager's instinct to rebel in their favor. Businesses and advertisers also use reverse psychology to influence customers. Limited time offers with phrases like, "This deal isn't for everyone," or "Only the best customers qualify," make people want the product more because it implies exclusivity. Nobody wants to feel left out, so they respond by purchasing to prove they belong in that select group. A classic example is an exclusive nightclub with a long line outside. Even if the club isn't full, making people wait makes them want to get inside more. By implying that entry is difficult, they increase demand. In relationships, reverse psychology can be used in subtle ways. If someone is unsure about committing to a relationship, their partner might say, "Maybe you're not ready for this kind of commitment yet." This statement shifts the pressure from convincing them to commit to making them prove that they are ready. The person being manipulated may now feel the need to demonstrate that they are, in fact, capable of commitment. Instead of resisting, they are now convincing themselves to take the step. Another common area where reverse psychology is effective is workplace negotiations. A boss who wants an employee to take on a project might say, "I understand if you're too busy to handle this right now. Maybe someone else can take it on." The employee, wanting to appear capable and hardworking, might insist on taking the project to prove they can handle the workload. This strategy allows the boss to push work onto someone without directly demanding it. Politicians and public figures also use reverse psychology to shape opinions. A leader might say, I don't expect everyone to support this policy because it takes real vision to see how it will benefit the future. People who want to be seen as forward-thinking may now support the policy just to align with that perception. In debates, one candidate may say, my opponent probably doesn't think you're ready for this kind of change, suggesting that disagreeing with them means underestimating the public's intelligence. This subtly pressures people into agreeing with the speaker. Parents frequently use reverse psychology when dealing with picky eaters. A child who refuses to eat vegetables might be told, you probably won't like these carrots. They're only for grown-ups. The child, wanting to assert independence and prove they are not a baby, might suddenly be interested in eating them. The parent has taken the child's natural instinct to resist authority and redirected it toward making a better choice. This strategy can also work in competitive environments. A coach might tell a team, the other team is probably stronger than us, so don't worry if we lose. This can ignite a sense of challenge, making the players work even harder to prove the coach wrong. By downplaying expectations, the coach removes pressure and creates an internal motivation in the players. Reverse psychology isn't always ethical. In relationships, it can be used to manipulate emotions in harmful ways. Someone might say, if you really cared, you'd know what's wrong, when in reality, they are avoiding direct communication. This forces the other person into a guessing game, making them feel anxious and responsible for fixing the issue. When used too often, this technique can create toxic dynamics where people feel pressured rather than making genuine choices. Even in parenting, overusing reverse psychology can backfire. If a child realizes they are being manipulated, they might start to ignore challenges or resist even more. A teenager who always hears, "You probably can't handle this responsibility," may eventually stop trying to prove themselves because they feel like they are always being tricked. It's important to balance this technique with direct and honest communication. Marketers also run the risk of overusing reverse psychology. If customers catch on that a product is being artificially limited or that a VIP-only deal is actually available to everyone, they may lose trust in the brand. Exclusivity should feel real, or else it loses its effectiveness. Scarcity tactics should be used sparingly to maintain credibility. Despite these risks, reverse psychology remains one of the most effective psychological tools because it makes people feel like they are making their own choices. It turns resistance into cooperation by shifting control to the person being influenced. People naturally dislike being told what to do, so giving them the illusion of control makes them more likely to act in ways they wouldn't have otherwise. One of the most powerful ways to use reverse psychology is through self-imposed limitations. For instance, someone who wants to quit social media might tell themselves, "I can use my phone whenever I want, but I'm choosing not to." This creates a sense of control rather than restriction. Instead of feeling like they are being forced to stop, they frame it as their own choice. This method works well for personal discipline because it prevents feelings of deprivation, which often lead to relapses. Teachers can also use reverse psychology to engage students. Instead of forcing participation, a teacher might say, "Only the smartest students tend to get this problem right." Suddenly, students are more motivated to answer because they want to be seen as smart. A professor might introduce a difficult topic by saying, "Most people find this part confusing, so don't feel bad if you don't get it right away." Rather than discouraging students, this lowers anxiety and encourages them to prove they can understand. Even social interactions can be influenced by this technique. If someone refuses to go to an event, a friend might say, "That's fine, but you'll probably miss out on something interesting." This plays into fear of missing out, making the person reconsider their decision. If someone is hesitant to try a new activity, saying you probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway, might spark curiosity and make them more willing to give it a chance. People often use reverse psychology without even realizing it. Statements like, "I don't think you can handle this," or "I bet you can't do it," push others to prove themselves. It works best when used sparingly and when the person being influenced doesn't catch on. Once someone realizes they are being manipulated, they may resist even harder or lose trust in the person using the technique. While effective, reverse psychology should be handled carefully. Used too often or in the wrong situations, it can backfire and create resentment. When applied correctly, it can be a powerful tool to encourage positive behavior, shift resistance into cooperation, and make people feel like they are acting on their own terms. Intermittent reinforcement works by rewarding behavior at unpredictable intervals, making it hard to break free from the cycle. A person never knows when they'll receive the reward, so they keep trying. This tactic is common in abusive relationships, gambling, and manipulative workplaces. Picture someone in a relationship where their partner gives affection inconsistently. One day, they're loving and supportive. The next, they're distant and cold. The affectionate moments come just often enough to keep hope alive. The person on the receiving end starts chasing those rare good moments, ignoring the bad ones. Over time, they become emotionally trapped, constantly trying to earn the reward of love and attention. Casinos use this principle to keep gamblers hooked. Slot machines don't pay out every time, but when they do, the random nature of the reward makes players want to keep going. If people knew exactly when they would win, the thrill would disappear. Because they don't, they keep pulling the lever, thinking the next spin might be the big one. Social media apps also rely on intermittent reinforcement. Notifications, likes, and messages come in unpredictable waves. One post might get ignored, but another gets flooded with engagement. This inconsistency keeps users checking their phones, waiting for that next hit of validation. It's not just about connection, it's about the unpredictability of when they'll feel valued. In the workplace, a boss might use intermittent reinforcement to keep employees loyal despite poor conditions. One month, there's a bonus or praise for hard work. The next, there's silence or criticism. Workers don't know when the next positive reinforcement will come, so they keep working harder, hoping for approval or recognition. This creates a cycle where employees stay in toxic environments, believing that if they just try harder, they'll get the reward. Parents sometimes use intermittent reinforcement without realizing it. Imagine a child begging for candy at the store. A parent says no, but after enough whining, they give in. The child learns that persistence sometimes leads to getting what they want. The next time they want something, they whine again, unsure if it will work, but knowing that it has before. This unpredictable reward system reinforces the behavior, making it even harder to stop. Intermittent reinforcement is powerful because it taps into the brain's reward system. When rewards are predictable, people lose interest quickly. But when they come at random intervals, anticipation builds. Dopamine, the brain chemical linked to pleasure and motivation, spikes when there's uncertainty. This creates a cycle where people keep trying, chasing that next hit of reward. People stuck in these cycles often don't realize what's happening. In a relationship, someone might defend their partner's bad behavior because the good times feel so rewarding. A gambler might tell themselves they're due for a win because they've lost so many times. An employee might stay in a toxic job because they remember how good it felt to be praised once, even if it rarely happens. Breaking free from intermittent reinforcement requires recognizing the pattern. Once someone sees that the reward is being used to control them, they can step back and make a conscious decision. They can start looking at the bigger picture. How often are they truly happy versus how often they're just waiting for the next good moment? Understanding this dynamic is the first step in regaining control. People who use intermittent reinforcement to manipulate others often do it intentionally. An emotionally abusive partner might withdraw affection to make their partner desperate for attention. A manipulative boss might withhold praise to keep employees seeking approval. Even marketers use it, sending unexpected discounts or limited-time offers to keep customers engaged. The unpredictability keeps people hooked, whether it's in relationships, business, or everyday life. Knowing how intermittent reinforcement works helps people protect themselves. Recognizing the pattern allows them to set boundaries and stop chasing inconsistent rewards. When someone realizes they're being manipulated, they can start making choices based on reality, not on the hope of the next good moment. The decoy effect is a psychological trick that makes one option look better by adding another option that no one is likely to choose. This technique influences decision-making without people realizing it. Businesses, marketers, and even negotiators use it to steer choices in their favor. Imagine you're buying popcorn at the movie theater. The small popcorn costs $5, and the large popcorn costs $10. Most people might hesitate to spend double the price for a larger size, but now imagine they add a medium popcorn for $9. Suddenly, the large popcorn seems like a much better deal because it's only $1 more than the medium. The medium popcorn is the decoy. It exists to make the large popcorn look like a steal. Without it, you might not have considered the large size. This is how the decoy effect works. It subtly pushes people toward a preferred choice by making an alternative look like a bad deal. A similar situation happens in retail stores with pricing structures. A customer walks into a store to buy a new smartphone. They see two models, one for $699 and another for $999. Some might hesitate to spend the extra $300 for the premium model. Now, the store introduces a third option, a slightly upgraded version of the cheaper model for $949. This third option has only a minor improvement over the base model, making it unattractive on its own. But now, the $999 model looks like a much better value because for only $50 more, the customer gets significant upgrades. The $949 phone is the decoy, positioned to make the most expensive option feel like the smartest choice. Restaurants use this trick on their menus. A diner opens a menu and sees a steak priced at $40 and a chicken dish at $25. The price difference is noticeable. The restaurant adds another steak option, priced at $38 but with fewer side dishes. Now, the original $40 steak looks much better in comparison. Most customers will pick the slightly more expensive steak instead of the chicken or the downgraded steak. The decoy effect shifts their decision without them noticing. Car dealerships apply the same tactic when pricing vehicles. A buyer considers two models, one with basic features for $20,000 and another with premium features for $30,000. Some might struggle to justify the extra $10,000. The dealership adds a third option, a slightly upgraded version of the basic model for $28,000. Now, the $30,000 car seems like the best value. The dealership never needed to sell the middle option. It just needed to make the high-end choice look irresistible. The effect also appears in subscription services. Many software companies offer three pricing tiers. The first is a basic plan with limited features, the second is a standard plan with more tools, and the third is a premium plan with everything. The standard plan is often positioned as the decoy. It costs slightly less than the premium plan but lacks key features. This setup nudges customers toward the highest priced option, making them feel like they're getting the most value. Negotiators use this technique to influence decision-making. Suppose an employer wants to hire a new candidate. The hiring team considers two applicants, one with 5 years of experience and another with 10. To make the 10-year candidate seem like the obvious choice, they add a third candidate with 8 years of experience but weaker credentials. The middle option makes the 10-year candidate look much stronger in comparison. Without the decoy, the 5-year applicant might have seemed like a competitive choice. Retailers apply the same effect in fashion. A customer shops for a new jacket and sees two options, a stylish one for $150 and a budget-friendly one for $75. The store introduces a third jacket priced at $140, but it's made from cheaper material. Now, the $150 jacket looks like the best choice. The decoy jacket makes the high-priced option seem more appealing. The travel industry also takes advantage of the decoy effect. A vacation website lists 3 travel packages. One is a budget-friendly package with minimal amenities, another is a premium package with luxury accommodations, and the third is slightly cheaper than the luxury option, but with significant drawbacks. The website knows most people won't pick the middle option. Instead, it exists to make the highest-priced package look like the best value. This strategy also appears in politics. A political party may introduce a candidate who holds extreme views to make their preferred candidate seem more moderate. Voters may see 3 candidates, one on the far left, one in the middle, and one on the far right. The middle candidate, who might have seemed too extreme in a 2-person race, now appears reasonable. The decoy effect influences public perception just as easily as it affects purchasing decisions. Tech companies use this effect when selling electronics. A consumer shops for a laptop and finds two options, one priced at $800 and another at $1,500. The company introduces a third model at $1,400, but with weaker specifications than the $1,500 laptop. Now, the higher-end laptop looks like a great deal. Most customers would have hesitated to spend $1,500, but with the decoy, the price seems justified. This tactic extends to gym memberships. A fitness center offers two options, a basic membership for $30 a month and an all-access membership for $70. They introduce a third option for $65, but it excludes key features. Now, the $70 plan looks much better. The gym never expects customers to choose the middle option. They just need it to make the expensive one seem reasonable. Even job offers include the decoy effect. A company makes two offers to a candidate, one with a lower salary but better benefits, and another with a high salary but fewer benefits. To make the high salary offer look better, they introduce a third option with a salary just below the higher offer, but with significantly worse benefits. Now the candidate is more likely to take the highest paying offer, thinking it's the best deal. The decoy effect influences personal finance decisions. A person shopping for a mortgage finds two loan options, one with a lower interest rate but higher closing costs, and another with a slightly higher rate but lower fees. A third option appears with a rate between the two but with unfavorable terms. This makes the highest interest option look better because it spreads out costs more predictably. Streaming services apply this tactic in their pricing models. A platform offers three plans: a basic plan with ads, a standard plan without ads but lacking 4K resolution, and a premium plan with everything. The middle option acts as the decoy. It exists to nudge customers toward the premium plan. Insurance companies follow a similar pattern. A customer shopping for car insurance finds three tiers: a basic plan with minimal coverage, a mid-tier plan with slight improvements, and a premium plan with full coverage. The mid-tier plan is slightly cheaper than the premium plan, but lacks major protections. Most customers will choose the premium option. Even social dynamics include this effect. A person choosing between two romantic partners might find that introducing a third option with slight flaws makes one of the original choices seem much better. The decoy effect shapes decisions in ways people rarely notice. This psychological trick works because people naturally compare options. Instead of assessing choices individually, they look at how each option compares to the others. By adding a decoy, decision makers can steer people toward their preferred outcome. Whether it's business, marketing, or negotiation, this tactic continues to influence choices in subtle but powerful ways. Anchoring bias happens when someone sets a high or low starting point to shape expectations. The first number or piece of information someone hears sticks in their mind and influences their decisions, even when it shouldn't. This trick works because the brain clings to the first piece of information it receives and compares everything else to it. The person being influenced often doesn't realize this is happening. Imagine walking into a store to buy a watch. The salesperson first shows you an expensive model priced at $5,000. Even if you know it's out of your budget, that price sticks in your mind. When they show you another watch for $1,500, it suddenly seems reasonable, even though it's still a lot of money. You might have hesitated to spend that much if it was the first price you saw. The high initial number, the anchor, makes everything else seem cheaper by comparison. Car dealerships use this trick all the time. A salesperson starts with a high price, knowing the buyer will try to negotiate. If the first price they mention is $40,000 and they later lower it to $35,000, the buyer feels like they're getting a deal. But if the first price had been $35,000, the customer might have tried to negotiate down to $30,000. The high starting point shifts expectations and changes how the final price feels. This bias also affects how people donate to charity. If a fundraiser suggests a donation of $500 before listing smaller amounts, more people will give higher amounts than if the suggestion started at $50. The larger number changes how people see the value of their donation. They compare their contribution to the high anchor instead of deciding based on their own financial situation. Anchoring works in negotiations as well. If someone is selling a used car, they might set the initial asking price much higher than what they actually expect to get. Buyers who don't know the car's real value will feel like they're getting a bargain when the seller agrees to lower the price. In reality, the seller may have already planned to sell for that lower amount, but use the high anchor to make the buyer feel like they won the negotiation. Real estate agents use a similar strategy. If a house is listed for $750,000, potential buyers use that as their frame of reference. Even if the house isn't worth that much, it makes slightly lower-priced homes seem more reasonable. Someone who originally wanted to spend $600,000 might stretch their budget to $675,000 because compared to the anchored price, it looks like a better deal. Retail stores take advantage of anchoring by marking items as on sale. If a jacket has a price tag of $300, but a big red sticker shows it's been reduced to $180, shoppers believe they're saving money. But that jacket may have never been worth $300 in the first place. The store simply created an artificial anchor to make the lower price seem attractive. This is why many shoppers fall for limited-time discounts that aren't really discounts at all. Doctors and medical professionals are also influenced by anchoring. When diagnosing patients, a doctor may hear an initial symptom and anchor onto it, leading them to overlook other possibilities. If a patient complains of a headache and mentions they've been stressed at work, the doctor might immediately assume stress is the cause. That assumption can lead to missing a more serious underlying issue, like a neurological condition. Anchoring doesn't just work with numbers. It also affects how people think about other types of information. If a company releases a new product and describes it as luxury before revealing the actual features, people will judge it based on that label. They will assume the product is high quality before they even experience it. This trick is common in advertising. Words like premium, exclusive, and elite create mental anchors before the buyer even sees the price or product details. Social media also exploits anchoring bias. When a post gets a lot of likes or shares early on, new viewers assume it must be valuable or entertaining. They are more likely to like or share it themselves, reinforcing the trend. If a post starts with very few likes, people assume it's not worth their attention and ignore it. The initial response creates an anchor that affects how others see the content. Job seekers can use anchoring in salary negotiations. If a candidate states a high salary expectation early in the conversation, the employer may adjust their offer upward. If the candidate waits for the employer to suggest a number first, they might receive a lower offer and struggle to negotiate up from there. Setting an anchor early gives them control over how the employer frames their value. Lawyers use anchoring in court. When arguing for damages in a lawsuit, they may suggest an extremely high compensation amount. Even if the judge or jury believes the amount is unreasonable, they still compare any final decision to that high number. The actual award may be lower, but it's often much higher than if the lawyer had suggested a more modest amount at the beginning. In personal relationships, anchoring plays a role in expectations. If someone in a new relationship starts by being overly affectionate, always texting, calling, and planning romantic gestures, their partner expects that level of attention to continue. Later, if they reduce their efforts, the partner feels like something is wrong, even if the relationship is still strong. The high initial attention set an anchor that later changes how normal behavior is perceived. Parents sometimes use anchoring without realizing it. If a child wants to play video games for 3 hours, the parent might say, "Absolutely not. That's way too long." The child then negotiates down to 2 hours, which seems more reasonable by comparison. The parent feels like they've compromised, but the child may have expected this outcome from the start. If the child had initially asked for 2 hours, the parent might have only allowed 1. Even friendships can be influenced by anchoring. If a friend is always generous, paying for meals and giving thoughtful gifts, people start to expect that behavior. When the friend stops, even for good reasons, others might feel let down. Their expectations were anchored to a level of generosity that wasn't sustainable long term. Anchoring bias also shows up in political debates. If one candidate makes an extreme proposal, the public's perception of what is reasonable shifts. A policy that once seemed radical now appears moderate because it's being compared to the extreme anchor. Politicians use this strategy to make their real goals seem more acceptable by first presenting an exaggerated version. This psychological trick is so powerful that even knowing about it doesn't always protect people from its effects. The first number, label, or expectation someone encounters affects how they interpret everything that follows. Anchoring bias shapes decisions in subtle ways, whether it's buying a car, negotiating a salary, or simply deciding how much to donate to a cause. The mind holds on to that initial reference point and compares everything else to it, often without realizing the influence it has. Projection happens when someone accuses another person of doing what they are actually doing. It is a psychological defense mechanism that shifts blame or responsibility onto someone else. This tactic can be used to manipulate others, avoid accountability, or create confusion in relationships. Imagine a coworker who frequently gossips about others. Instead of admitting to their behavior, they accuse you of spreading rumors. This makes you feel defensive, even though you haven't done anything wrong. By projecting their actions onto you, they successfully divert attention away from their own behavior and place doubt in your mind. This tactic is common in relationships where one person wants to control the narrative. A cheating partner might constantly accuse the other of being unfaithful. Their accusations serve two purposes. First, they create a distraction from their own actions. Second, they plant seeds of doubt and insecurity, making their partner feel guilty for something they haven't done. Over time, this can erode trust and make the accused person more vulnerable to further manipulation. Projection is also seen in workplace dynamics. A manager who makes frequent mistakes might blame their team for poor performance. Instead of acknowledging their own shortcomings, they shift responsibility onto others. This creates an environment where employees feel constantly on edge, trying to defend themselves instead of focusing on their work. The manager, meanwhile, avoids scrutiny and maintains their authority. This tactic can also appear in friendships. A friend who is overly critical might accuse you of being judgmental. This deflects attention from their own negativity and puts you in a defensive position. If you try to call them out, they might double down, making you question your own behavior. Over time, this can create a dynamic where you feel like you are always walking on eggshells around them. Projection is especially dangerous when used by people in positions of power. Politicians, for example, often accuse their opponents of the very things they are guilty of. A corrupt leader might claim that the opposition is dishonest and working against the people. By doing so, they shift attention away from their own misconduct and create confusion among the public. This strategy is effective because it plays on people's fears and emotions, making it harder to see the truth. One reason projection works so well is that people tend to doubt themselves when faced with strong accusations. If someone insists that you are being dishonest, you might start second-guessing your own actions. This is especially true if the accusation comes from someone you trust or respect. The more emotionally invested you are in the relationship, the harder it is to see the manipulation for what it is. Another reason projection is effective is that it exploits the human tendency to assume good intentions. Most people do not expect others to accuse them falsely, so they take accusations seriously. This gives manipulators an advantage, as they can use projection to control the narrative and shift blame onto others. A person using projection may also escalate their accusations if they feel threatened. If they sense that their deception is about to be exposed, they might intensify their claims, making them more aggressive or detailed. This can overwhelm the accused person, making it harder for them to defend themselves. By the time the truth comes out, the damage may already be done. Defending against projection requires a strong sense of self-awareness. Recognizing when someone is accusing you of their own behavior is the first step in protecting yourself. If an accusation feels completely out of place, take a step back and assess the situation. Ask yourself whether the person making the accusation has a history of similar behavior. Another useful strategy is to stay calm and not engage emotionally. Manipulators rely on emotional reactions to fuel their tactics. If you react defensively, they will use it against you. Instead, respond with facts and avoid getting drawn into unnecessary arguments. If a coworker falsely accuses you, for example, keep a record of your work and interactions. Documentation can help prove the truth when needed. Setting boundaries is also important when dealing with someone who uses projection. If a friend constantly accuses you of being selfish when they are the one acting that way, limit your interactions with them. Make it clear that you will not accept false accusations. If the behavior continues, consider distancing yourself from the relationship altogether. Understanding projection also helps in spotting it when others are being manipulated. If you notice a friend or colleague being unfairly blamed for something, offer support. Sometimes just pointing out the tactic can help them see through the manipulation. People trapped in toxic relationships or work environments often struggle to recognize what is happening to them. A fresh perspective can make a big difference. Projection is a tactic that thrives on confusion and self-doubt. The best defense is awareness and confidence in your own actions. When you know who you are and what you stand for, false accusations lose their power. Recognizing projection for what it is allows you to maintain control over your thoughts and decisions, rather than falling into the trap of someone else's deception. The foot in the door technique. Asking for a small favor first increases the chance of getting a bigger one later. People are more likely to agree to something big if they first say yes to something small. This technique works because of consistency. When someone commits to an action, they want to stay consistent with their previous choice. Imagine a charity fundraiser. A person approaches you on the street and asks if you have time for a quick survey. It's a simple request, so you agree. After answering a few easy questions, they thank you and mention how donations help their cause. Since you already gave them your time, it feels natural to support them in another way. If they had asked for a donation right away, you might have ignored them. The first yes makes the second one more likely. Marketers and salespeople use this method all the time. A salesperson at an electronics store asks if you want to try a new pair of headphones. It's a small request, so you put them on. Once you do, they talk about the sound quality and comfort. Since you've already engaged, rejecting the idea of buying them feels inconsistent. You may not buy them, but the chances are higher than if they had just asked, "Do you want to buy these?" Even in personal relationships, this trick appears. A friend asks for a tiny favor, like watching their pet for an hour. Later, they ask if you can take care of it for the whole weekend. You already agreed to a smaller version of the request, so refusing feels awkward. You tell yourself, "What's a little more effort?" even if you wouldn't have agreed to the weekend favor from the start. This technique doesn't just work in face-to-face interactions. Online companies use it to guide behavior. A website asks you to sign up for a free trial. No money is involved, so there's no risk. After a few weeks, they remind you that upgrading gives full access. You already signed up, so the jump to paying doesn't feel as big. The first step made you more comfortable with the service, which makes commitment easier. Social movements and political campaigns also rely on this method. Activists might ask people to sign a petition. Signing takes no effort, so many agree. Later, the same people receive an email asking for a donation or to attend a protest. Since they already showed support by signing, ignoring the next request feels inconsistent. Businesses use it with pricing models. A company offers a basic version of a product for free or cheap. Once users get familiar with it, they introduce premium features for a small fee. People who have already integrated the product into their lives are more likely to upgrade. The first yes opened the door to the paid commitment. This technique also appears in job negotiations. A manager asks an employee if they can stay an extra 30 minutes to help with a project. The employee agrees because it's a small request. Later, the manager asks if they can take on extra tasks regularly. Since they've already agreed to do more once, declining the second request feels harder. The technique works best when the initial request is small enough that refusal is unlikely. If it requires too much effort, people might reject it outright. Once someone agrees, their self-image shifts slightly. They see themselves as helpful, cooperative, or interested. The next request builds on this identity. There are ethical concerns with this method. It can be used for genuine persuasion, but it can also manipulate people into commitments they wouldn't normally make. In some cases, people regret their decisions later, feeling tricked into agreeing. Understanding this method helps people recognize when it's being used on them. If a request seems harmless at first, but escalates later, they can step back and reassess. The key is to recognize that saying yes once doesn't mean future agreement is required. Euphemisms and framing are powerful psychological tricks that shape how people perceive information. These tactics involve altering language to make ideas more appealing or less threatening. People use them in politics, marketing, relationships, and everyday conversations. The goal is to influence emotions and decisions without changing the actual content of a message. By adjusting the way something is phrased, you can soften its impact, exaggerate its importance, or change how it is received. When people hear the term euphemism, they often think of polite or indirect ways of saying something unpleasant. Instead of saying someone got fired, you might hear that they were let go or downsized. Instead of calling a military attack a bombing, it might be referred to as a surgical strike. These changes in wording don't alter what happened, but they change how people feel about it. Let go sounds less harsh than fired, and surgical strike makes an attack seem precise and justified, even if it caused destruction. Framing takes this idea further by structuring a message to create a specific reaction. In business, a store might advertise a product as 95% effective, rather than saying it fails 5% of the time. The information is identical, but the way it's framed changes how people interpret it. A customer hearing 95% effective focuses on success, while 5% failure highlights the risk. The difference in response can be significant, even though both statements tell the same truth. Politicians use euphemisms and framing to shape public opinion. A government might refer to raising taxes as enhancing revenue, or describe a war as a peacekeeping operation. These changes in language make policies seem less aggressive or more acceptable. If a law limits certain freedoms, it might be called a security measure rather than a restriction. This subtle shift influences how people react to the policy without changing its actual effects. In relationships, people use these tactics to avoid conflict or soften bad news. Instead of saying, "I don't love you anymore," someone might say, "I think we've grown apart." Instead of admitting to cheating, a person might say, "I made a mistake." The goal is to reduce the emotional impact of the truth by making it sound less severe. Sometimes this helps prevent unnecessary hurt, but in other cases, it can be a way to avoid accountability. Marketing relies heavily on framing to make products more appealing. A snack labeled 80% fat-free sounds healthier than one labeled contains 20% fat, even though both statements mean the same thing. A company selling a product might say, 4 out of 5 customers recommend it, instead of 20% of customers didn't like it. By choosing words that focus on the positive, businesses can influence consumer behavior. Even in daily conversations, people use euphemisms and framing without realizing it. If someone is describing a friend's drinking problem, they might say, "He likes to have a good time," instead of calling him an alcoholic. If a job is stressful and underpaid, someone might describe it as challenging but rewarding. These adjustments in wording can change how both the speaker and listener feel about a situation. In legal settings, framing plays a key role in shaping opinions. A lawyer defending a client accused of theft might say, "He borrowed the money with the intent to return it," instead of calling it stealing. Prosecutors do the opposite, using words like premeditated instead of a bad decision to make a crime sound worse. The way arguments are framed can affect jury decisions, even when both sides use the same facts. In healthcare, doctors sometimes use euphemisms to soften bad news. Instead of saying a patient has a terminal illness, they might say, "The prognosis is not good." Instead of saying a procedure is painful, they might call it uncomfortable. While this can help patients cope with difficult situations, it can also mislead them if they don't fully understand what's happening. Financial institutions also use framing to influence behavior. A credit card company might advertise only $25 per month instead of stating the full cost of a purchase with interest. A bank might promote low introductory rates without highlighting how much those rates will increase later. These strategies encourage people to make decisions without fully considering the consequences. In the workplace, managers use euphemisms to make layoffs and policy changes seem more acceptable. Instead of saying employees are being fired, they might say the company is restructuring or realigning its workforce. If an employee's responsibilities increase without a raise, it might be framed as an opportunity for growth. These language shifts help companies maintain morale, even when changes negatively affect employees. Advertisers take advantage of framing by carefully choosing words to describe their products. A shampoo might be advertised as strengthening rather than just cleaning hair, even if the formula doesn't actually make hair stronger. A detergent might be called tough on stains rather than just effective, adding an emotional element to the message. These small changes in wording can make a product more appealing without altering what it actually does. Real estate agents use framing to sell homes by highlighting the positive aspects while downplaying the negatives. A tiny apartment might be described as cozy. A house in need of repairs might be called a fixer-upper rather than run down. The goal is to influence buyers' perceptions and make properties sound more attractive than they really are. News media also use framing to shape public perception. A protest might be described as a riot or a demonstration, depending on the agenda of the news outlet. An economic downturn might be called a market correction instead of a crash. By choosing specific words, journalists influence how audiences interpret events. Social media amplifies the effects of euphemisms and framing. Influencers and brands craft their messages carefully to control their image. A scandal might be referred to as a misunderstanding. A celebrity caught lying might say they misspoke. These adjustments help maintain a positive reputation even in negative situations. Even in parenting, people use these tactics to shape children's perceptions. Instead of saying, "This food is bad for you," a parent might say, "This food isn't the best choice." Instead of calling a punishment discipline, they might refer to it as teaching a lesson. The goal is to encourage positive behavior without creating unnecessary fear or resistance. Understanding these strategies helps people recognize when they are being influenced. Whether in politics, business, relationships, or media, words shape how people think and feel. Recognizing euphemisms and framing allows individuals to see past manipulative language and make informed decisions based on reality rather than perception. Overloading someone with information can be a powerful manipulation tactic. It happens when a person or group bombards someone with so much data, jargon, or technical language that they struggle to process it all. This tactic works by creating confusion, making the victim feel inadequate, and forcing them to rely on the manipulator for guidance. It can happen in conversations, contracts, sales pitches, legal discussions, or even in relationships. Imagine a car salesperson explaining every single technical detail of an engine in rapid succession. They list the horsepower, torque, fuel efficiency, transmission type, cylinder arrangement, aerodynamics, and dozens of other specifications without pause. Most customers won't understand every term, and rather than admit their confusion, they feel pressure to nod along. By the end of the conversation, they're mentally exhausted. Instead of asking questions, they default to trusting the salesperson's recommendations. This is a textbook example of how overloading with information can be used to control a decision. In legal situations, this method can be even more damaging. A person facing a lawsuit might be handed a contract filled with dense legal language, technical clauses, and references to obscure laws. The sheer amount of detail makes it hard for them to understand what they're agreeing to. A dishonest lawyer might take advantage of this, assuring them that it's standard procedure or just formalities. Faced with an overwhelming amount of legal text, many people simply sign without fully understanding the consequences. This is why so many hidden fees, unfavorable terms, and exploitative clauses go unnoticed until it's too late. This tactic also shows up in medical settings. A doctor who wants to push a specific treatment might overwhelm a patient with scientific terminology, research studies, and complex medical jargon. The patient, already stressed about their health, struggles to keep up with the explanation. Instead of making an informed decision, they end up blindly following the doctor's advice. This can lead to unnecessary procedures, expensive treatments, or even choices that go against the patient's best interests. Overloading with information is also common in workplace settings. A manager might flood employees with excessive reports, emails, and statistics to keep them too busy to question company policies. In meetings, a supervisor could rapidly present charts, figures, and complex projections without giving employees time to analyze them. When an employee struggles to keep up, they are less likely to challenge decisions or push back against unreasonable demands. This keeps power concentrated at the top, as only those who can manage the information overload have real control. Politicians and public figures also use this tactic when addressing the public. In a crisis, a government official might hold a press conference filled with numbers, expert opinions, and complex policy explanations. Instead of simplifying the key points, they drown the audience in information. The result is confusion. When people feel lost, they are more likely to trust whoever seems confident and authoritative, even if that person isn't telling the full truth. This is why misinformation thrives in environments where people are overwhelmed with conflicting data. In personal relationships, overloading with information can be used to avoid accountability. A person caught in a lie might start explaining every little detail about their day, adding unnecessary context and extra information to distract from the main issue. Instead of answering a simple question, they create a web of details that makes it harder for the other person to pinpoint the truth. This can be particularly effective in arguments, where one person might throw out so many points at once that their partner can't address them all. This shifts the focus away from the real issue and makes the conversation exhausting to continue. The way overloading works is tied to how the brain processes information. When faced with too much data at once, people experience cognitive overload. This makes it harder to think critically, remember details, or make clear decisions. Instead of analyzing each piece of information, the brain looks for shortcuts. This often means relying on authority figures, following social cues, or defaulting to the easiest option. Manipulators understand this and use it to their advantage. By creating an environment where their target feels overwhelmed, they position themselves as the solution. Some people use this tactic without realizing it. A teacher who explains too many concepts at once might think they are being thorough, but instead, they leave students confused. A well-meaning friend might flood someone with advice, believing they are helping, when in reality, they are making the situation more stressful. The difference between unintentional information overload and deliberate manipulation is intent. A manipulator wants their target to feel lost, while an honest person usually just lacks awareness of how overwhelming their communication is. This tactic is especially dangerous when combined with authority. A financial advisor, for example, might bury a client in investment options, economic trends, and industry jargon. The client, unable to process everything, may feel too intimidated to ask questions. They end up following the advisor's recommendations without fully understanding the risks. In extreme cases, this can lead to financial loss, as people unknowingly sign up for bad deals or high-risk investments. Defending against information overload requires active effort. The first step is recognizing when it's happening. If a conversation feels overwhelming, rushed, or unnecessarily complex, that's a red flag. When someone throws out too many details at once, it's okay to pause and ask for clarification. A simple request like, "Can you break that down into the key points?" forces the other person to simplify their message. If they resist or try to distract from the question, that's a sign they may be deliberately overloading information. Breaking information into manageable pieces helps counteract cognitive overload. Instead of trying to absorb everything at once, focus on the key points. In legal or financial situations, this means reading documents carefully, asking for summaries, and consulting a trusted third party before making a decision. When dealing with technical explanations, asking for examples or real-world applications can make the information more understandable. In professional settings, setting boundaries around communication helps reduce information overload. Employees who are bombarded with excessive reports, emails, and meetings can push back by requesting clear summaries, prioritizing key tasks and managing their workflow more efficiently. Instead of accepting every piece of information at face value, filtering out what's truly important helps maintain focus and prevent manipulation. In personal relationships, recognizing when someone is using information overload to avoid accountability is crucial. If a conversation feels deliberately confusing, bringing the focus back to the core issue helps cut through the distraction. Asking direct questions and refusing to be sidetracked forces the other person to address the real topic at hand. The ability to simplify complex topics is a sign of true understanding. People who genuinely want to communicate will make an effort to be clear. Those who use excessive information as a tool of control will resist simplification because their power depends on confusion. Recognizing this difference helps people navigate conversations with confidence and resist being manipulated through information overload. Feigning ignorance is when someone pretends not to understand something to manipulate a conversation. This tactic forces the other person to explain, rephrase, or overextend themselves, which can lead to mistakes, frustration, or unintended revelations. It can be subtle, making it difficult to detect, and it's commonly used in debates, negotiations, and even everyday conversations. A simple example of feigning ignorance is when someone acts confused about a topic they actually understand. Suppose a manager knows an employee is upset about an unfair workload. Instead of addressing the issue directly, the manager might ask, "I'm not sure I understand. Why do you feel that way?" Even though they are fully aware of the unfair treatment. The employee now has to articulate their feelings in a way that convinces the manager, making them more vulnerable to counter-arguments or dismissals. In a more deceptive use, a person might pretend they don't understand a rule or policy to avoid accountability. A student who missed a deadline could say, "Oh, I didn't realize it was due yesterday. I thought it was next week." This forces the teacher to decide between enforcing the rule or appearing unreasonable. The tactic subtly shifts responsibility away from the person pretending to be ignorant and onto the other party. Feigning ignorance can also be used to extract information. A detective might act as if they don't understand a suspect's timeline, hoping the suspect will correct them and reveal an inconsistency. A journalist might pretend to misunderstand a politician's statement, pushing them to clarify in a way that exposes contradictions. These situations show how the tactic can be powerful in uncovering truth, even when it's used deceptively. In personal relationships, this tactic is often employed to avoid confrontation. If a spouse forgets an anniversary, they might say, "Wait, was that today? I could have sworn it was next week." This forces their partner to either accept the excuse or argue about whether the forgetfulness was intentional. By acting confused, the person avoids direct blame and shifts the conversation away from responsibility. At work, feigning ignorance can be a passive-aggressive strategy to avoid unwanted tasks. If a coworker doesn't want to take on extra work, they might say, "Oh, I didn't realize that was part of my job," even if they know it is. This puts the responsibility on the other person to prove otherwise, buying time or discouraging the request. It also works well in negotiations. A car buyer might pretend not to understand financing terms to make the seller explain them in detail. This can lead to the seller unintentionally revealing hidden fees or loopholes. A lawyer might use the tactic to get a witness to over-explain, hoping they contradict themselves. Feigning ignorance is often frustrating for the person on the receiving end because it creates an imbalance in communication. The person pretending to be confused controls the flow of the conversation, while the other person is forced to clarify or justify their points. This is why it is commonly used in arguments, where one side tries to make the other feel as if they are overreacting or being unreasonable. For example, someone accused of being rude might say, "I don't understand. How was that rude?" This forces the other person to explain, making them seem like they are nitpicking. If the accuser struggles to articulate their reasoning, it weakens their argument, allowing the person feigning ignorance to avoid taking responsibility. It is also a common tactic in politics. A public figure caught in a controversy might say, "I don't understand why people are upset," even when they know exactly why. This forces critics to explain their anger repeatedly, which can make the controversy seem exaggerated or baseless. In some cases, this can even cause the critics to appear unreasonable, shifting public sympathy toward the person using the tactic. Feigning ignorance is particularly effective when used against people who are emotionally invested in a conversation. When someone cares deeply about an issue, they are more likely to get frustrated when forced to explain themselves repeatedly. This frustration can lead to them making statements they regret, losing credibility, or simply giving up. A manipulator can use this to their advantage by maintaining a calm, confused demeanor while the other person becomes agitated. This tactic can also be used to set traps. If someone suspects their friend is lying about where they were last night, they might pretend not to know the details and ask open-ended questions. The friend, thinking they are safe, may add unnecessary details that later contradict each other. By acting unaware, the person asking the questions gathers more information than they would if they directly accuse the friend of lying. Feigning ignorance can also be a way to delay confrontation. If a manager knows an employee is unhappy but doesn't want to address it, they might act like they don't understand the problem. This forces the employee to keep explaining, making them feel like they are the problem rather than the issue itself. In some cases, this can discourage the employee from bringing up concerns in the future, reinforcing the manager's control. Parents sometimes use this tactic with their children. If a child breaks a rule but doesn't realize their parent knows, the parent might ask leading questions instead of directly confronting them. This can make the child reveal more than they intended. For example, a parent might say, "Where did you go after school?" instead of asking, "Why did you go to your friend's house when I told you not to?" The child, thinking the parent doesn't know, might reveal their mistake on their own. This tactic is also common in customer service. A company that doesn't want to issue a refund might pretend they don't understand the request. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by defective. Could you explain?" This forces the customer to keep justifying their complaint, hoping they will give up out of frustration. Feigning ignorance can be a useful strategy in certain situations, but it is often manipulative. It shifts the burden of explanation onto the other person, making them work harder to prove their point. This can be frustrating, confusing, or even discouraging, leading people to give up on conversations or decisions they otherwise would have pursued. Because of this, it is one of the most effective ways to control a discussion without seeming aggressive. People who frequently encounter this tactic can defend against it by recognizing when someone is pretending to be confused. Instead of falling into the trap of over-explaining, they can respond by setting boundaries. If someone says, "I don't understand what you mean," they can reply, "I think you do." This forces the person using the tactic to either admit understanding or continue pretending in a way that becomes obvious. Feigning ignorance is powerful because it creates an illusion of innocence. A person using this tactic rarely looks aggressive, even though they are manipulating the conversation. They appear confused, open-minded, or even naive, which makes it difficult to accuse them of being deceptive. This makes it one of the most subtle but effective forms of psychological manipulation. Using the illusion of control makes people think they are in charge when they are not. It happens when someone offers a choice that seems independent but is actually rigged. A common example is a parent telling a child, "Do you want to brush your teeth before or after your bath?" The child believes they have a say, but brushing their teeth is not actually optional. This trick works because people dislike feeling powerless. By presenting an option, even one that is manipulated, the target feels like they made the decision. Creating a sense of urgency forces people to act without thinking. When someone tells you, "This offer expires in an hour," or "If you don't act now, you'll lose your chance," they are using this tactic. The goal is to bypass rational thought. When under pressure, people are more likely to make emotional decisions. Limited time sales, countdown timers, and artificial deadlines are classic examples. It is the same reason why infomercials shout, "Call now, supplies are running out." The reality is, supplies often aren't running out. The real goal is to make you react before you can evaluate your choices. Feigning ignorance is a way to extract information without seeming intrusive. A person using this technique will pretend they don't understand something, forcing you to explain more than necessary. For example, a manipulative coworker might ask, "I'm confused about why you got that promotion. Can you walk me through it?" The person on the receiving end will feel the need to justify themselves, often revealing personal doubts or inside details. Another example is when a scammer acts clueless, making the target feel like the expert, which in turn lowers their guard. People want to be seen as knowledgeable, so they over-explain when they believe someone else is uninformed. Negging is a method of making someone feel slightly insecure, so they seek approval from the manipulator. A common example happens in dating, where someone might say, "You're cute, but I usually go for taller people." The hidden message is that the person doesn't fully meet their standards. This creates a subtle feeling of inadequacy, making the target work harder to impress them. Negging can also appear in the workplace when a boss says, "Your presentation was decent. If only you had better design skills, it would have been great." The employee will feel a need to prove their worth by improving in the way the boss suggests. This trick works because humans crave validation, especially from those who seem just out of reach. Gaslighting is one of the most damaging tactics because it makes people doubt their own reality. It happens when someone repeatedly tells another person that their memory, perception, or emotions are wrong. An abusive partner might say, "You're imagining things. That never happened," even when there's clear evidence. Over time, the victim begins questioning their own mind. In the workplace, a manager might shift deadlines or change details of a project and then claim, "I told you about this last week," when they didn't. This erodes confidence, making the target more reliant on the manipulator for guidance. Intermittent reinforcement keeps people hooked by rewarding them unpredictably. Casinos use this method with slot machines. Instead of rewarding a player every time, they win at random intervals. This unpredictability makes the person keep trying, hoping the next pull will be the lucky one. In relationships, an emotionally distant partner might suddenly shower their significant other with affection, only to withdraw again. The inconsistency creates an addiction-like response, making the victim crave the next moment of kindness. The human brain is wired to chase rewards that come unpredictably, which is why this method is so effective. Projection is a defense mechanism where a person accuses someone else of the very thing they are guilty of. A cheating spouse might say, "You've been acting suspicious lately. Are you hiding something from me?" This shifts attention away from their own behavior. A manipulative boss who micromanages might say, "You don't trust me to handle things, do you?" when in reality, they are the ones struggling to let go of control. This tactic confuses the victim, making them feel like they need to defend themselves instead of addressing the real issue. Future faking happens when someone makes promises about the future to control the present. A toxic partner might say, "We'll get married next year," without any real intention of doing so. The promise keeps the other person invested. In business, an employer might say, "A promotion is coming soon," to keep an employee working harder. The trick works because people make sacrifices for what they believe is coming. By the time they realize the promise was empty, they have already given too much to walk away easily. Triangulation creates tension between two people by introducing a third party. A manipulative friend might say, "Sarah was talking about you the other day. She thinks you're unreliable." This sparks doubt and makes the target question their relationship with Sarah. A toxic boss might compare two employees, saying, "John always stays late. You should be more like him." This breeds competition and insecurity. The goal is to keep people distracted and uncertain, so they rely more on the manipulator for validation. Loss aversion exploits the fact that people fear losing something more than they desire gaining something new. A salesperson might say, "If you don't sign today, this deal disappears forever." The fear of losing out often pushes people to act. In relationships, a controlling partner might say, "If you leave me, you'll never find someone who loves you like I do." The idea of losing something, even if it's toxic, keeps people trapped. This works because humans are wired to avoid loss at all costs. Shifting goalposts keeps someone in a constant state of feeling not good enough. A boss might say, "You need to complete 5 projects to get a raise." When the employee does that, the goal suddenly changes to 10 projects. A partner might say, I'll commit once you change this habit. When that habit changes, a new demand appears. The point is to keep the target feeling like they must always prove themselves without ever reaching a satisfying result. The decoy effect manipulates decision-making by introducing an option that makes another choice seem better. If a restaurant offers a small coffee for $3 and for $7, most people will choose the small because the price jump is big. But if they add a medium for $6.50, suddenly the large seems like a much better deal. The medium is a decoy, designed to push people toward the more expensive choice. Companies use this trick in pricing structures, making one option look much more appealing than it actually is. Social proof exploitation works by making people believe something is valuable just because others seem to believe it. If a restaurant has a long line outside, new customers assume it must be good. Marketers use fake reviews, influencer endorsements, and testimonials to create artificial popularity. In relationships, a manipulative person might say, "Everyone loves me, so if you have a problem with me, maybe you're the issue." This pressures the target into doubting themselves instead of questioning the manipulator. Bad cop, good cop creates the illusion that one person is on your side when both are working together. In negotiations, one person will act aggressively, making extreme demands. Then the good cop steps in, appearing sympathetic and reasonable. The target, relieved by the change in tone, is more likely to comply with the good cop than they would have been otherwise. This technique is common in police interrogations, sales tactics, and even toxic relationships. Each of these tactics exploits basic psychological tendencies, making them powerful and difficult to recognize. They work because they tap into fear, insecurity, trust, or the natural human desire to belong. Once aware of them, people can spot manipulation early and resist falling into psychological traps. Playing the victim, pretending to be the victim to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility. People who play the victim use their struggles, real or exaggerated, to manipulate others. They act helpless, as if the world has wronged them at every turn. Their goal is to gain sympathy, evade blame, or control others. This tactic works well because most people don't want to seem heartless. They feel guilty ignoring someone in distress. The person playing the victim understands this and exploits it. Imagine a workplace scenario where a manager gives constructive feedback to an employee. Instead of taking the advice, the employee sulks and says they are being picked on. They might tell coworkers how unfairly they were treated. They could even cry or exaggerate the situation to make the manager seem cruel. If done skillfully, they shift the narrative from their poor performance to their supposed suffering. This discourages future criticism because no one wants to be labeled as a bully. In relationships, this behavior can be even more damaging. A manipulative partner might use past trauma as a shield. If they get caught lying or being unfaithful, they turn the focus to their struggles. They talk about their childhood neglect or past heartbreaks. Instead of answering for their actions, they redirect attention. The other person, feeling guilty or empathetic, forgives them. Over time, this creates an unbalanced relationship where one partner always has to prove their love by excusing bad behavior. Parents can also use this trick on their children. A mother might constantly remind her kids of how much she sacrificed. She won't let them make independent choices because she gave up everything for them. The kids, feeling indebted, put their needs aside. They shape their lives around keeping her happy, not realizing she is manipulating them. This tactic keeps them close and under control. The workplace, relationships, and family settings are not the only places where people play the victim. Politicians use this strategy to sway public opinion. A leader caught in a scandal might claim they are being unfairly attacked by the media. Instead of addressing the accusations, they focus on how much stress their family is under. They paint themselves as the underdog, fighting against a corrupt system. This turns supporters into defenders. People feel the need to stand by them, even when the facts say otherwise. This manipulation works because it taps into natural human emotions. Sympathy is a powerful force. People want to help those who suffer. They don't always stop to question if the suffering is real or exaggerated. The person playing the victim takes advantage of this kindness. They cry, they talk about their hardships, and they make others feel responsible for their pain. The person being manipulated feels obligated to help, even when they shouldn't. A skilled manipulator knows how to mix truth with fiction. They don't fabricate everything. Instead, they take real events and twist them. If someone criticizes them, they focus only on the harshest words and ignore the context. If they fail at something, they blame others instead of taking responsibility. If they make mistakes, they claim they were pressured into them. Everything becomes someone else's fault. This way, they never have to admit wrongdoing. Another classic example is a friend who always has a crisis. Every time they need money, they have a heartbreaking story to go with it. They just lost their job, or their landlord is unfair, or their partner walked out on them. The stories always make them look helpless and make others feel guilty for saying no. If you lend them money, they rarely pay it back. When confronted, they bring up a new crisis to avoid responsibility. This cycle continues until the person being manipulated realizes they are being used. Social media has amplified this tactic. People broadcast their suffering to large audiences. They post long stories about how the world has wronged them, hoping for validation. They might even exaggerate events to gain more sympathy. Others, unaware of the full story, rush to support them. Once someone is seen as a victim, questioning them becomes difficult. Anyone who doubts their story risks being labeled as cruel or insensitive. Victimhood manipulation can also take a more subtle form. Some people constantly complain but never seek solutions. They always have something wrong in their lives, yet they never take steps to fix it. They don't want solutions. They want attention. If someone offers advice, they dismiss it. They would rather receive endless sympathy than actually improve their situation. This keeps others engaged, always offering comfort, but never seeing progress. People who play the victim also use guilt as a weapon. They remind others of how much they have suffered to keep them from speaking up. If someone tries to hold them accountable, they bring up past hardships to shut the conversation down. They might say things like, "After everything I've been through, I can't believe you'd treat me this way." This shifts focus from the issue at hand to their suffering. The person confronting them now feels guilty and backs off. This behavior can be hard to recognize because real victims do exist. People genuinely go through hardship. The difference lies in how they handle it. A real victim seeks solutions, learns, and grows from their struggles. A manipulative victim uses their hardship to control others. They don't want help, they want power over those who feel sorry for them. One way to spot this manipulation is to look for patterns. A person playing the victim will always have an excuse. They never take responsibility. Every failure is someone else's fault. They expect special treatment because of their struggles. If questioned, they become defensive or shift blame. Breaking free from this manipulation requires emotional strength. It means setting boundaries and refusing to be guilt-tripped. It means recognizing that sympathy should not come at the cost of your own well-being. It is okay to help others, but not when that help is constantly taken advantage of. Recognizing this tactic is the first step in avoiding it. People who play the victim thrive on others' emotions. When those emotions are no longer easy to exploit, they lose their power. They either change their ways or move on to someone else. Either way, knowing how to identify this behavior protects you from being controlled by someone else's endless cycle of suffering. Social proof exploitation is the act of making something seem popular or widely accepted to influence people's behavior. People tend to follow the crowd, assuming that if many others are doing something, it must be the right choice. This principle is often used in marketing, politics, social dynamics, and even personal relationships. It plays on the natural human tendency to conform, often without questioning whether the choice is truly beneficial. A classic example of social proof is the way businesses use customer reviews. A product with thousands of 5-star ratings feels more trustworthy than one with only a few. Even if some of those reviews are fake, the sheer number convinces potential buyers that the product is worth their money. Companies manipulate this effect by purchasing reviews or highlighting only the most positive feedback while burying negative ones. This creates an illusion of widespread approval, leading more people to buy the product without critically evaluating its actual quality. Another common scenario is the use of crowd size in politics. Politicians will stage rallies with large audiences or digitally alter images to make it seem like their events are overflowing with supporters. The goal is to make undecided voters think, if so many people support this candidate, maybe I should too. People want to be part of the winning team, and seeing a leader with a massive following can tip the scales in their favor. Even if the numbers are manipulated, the perception of popularity influences real decisions. Social media has taken social proof exploitation to a new level. Influencers use fake followers and engagement to appear more popular than they actually are. When someone sees an account with 1 million followers, they assume the person must be influential and worth listening to. Advertisers capitalize on this by paying influencers to endorse products, making it seem like the latest trend. In reality, much of this is orchestrated, and many endorsements are purely transactional rather than genuine recommendations. Yet, the illusion of widespread popularity convinces people to follow along. Restaurants and clubs use social proof in a more physical way. Some establishments deliberately create long lines outside, even when there's plenty of space inside. This makes passersby assume the place must be high in demand, increasing the chances they'll want to visit. Similarly, signs that say best seller or most popular item nudge customers toward choosing those items, even if the labels are arbitrary. People assume that if others are choosing it, it must be the best option available. The entertainment industry thrives on social proof. Studios pay for early ticket sales to make a movie appear like a box office hit. Music labels use streaming farms to inflate play counts, making a song seem more popular than it is. Once people see something trending, they're more likely to check it out, reinforcing the cycle. The artificial boost creates real success because people assume popularity equals quality. In the workplace, social proof is often used to manipulate decisions. Employees are more likely to agree with a proposal if they believe most of their colleagues support it. Managers sometimes create the illusion of consensus by planting key figures in a meeting to vocalize agreement early on. Once a few people express support, others follow, not wanting to be the lone dissenter. This technique is particularly effective in corporate settings, where people fear standing out or going against the majority. Dating and relationships are another area where social proof plays a role. People are naturally drawn to those who seem desirable to others. Someone who is constantly surrounded by admirers appears more attractive, even if nothing about their personality or appearance has changed. This is why some individuals exaggerate their social life or fabricate stories about past romantic successes. They understand that perceived desirability can make them more appealing. It's also why dating apps highlight profiles with the most matches, reinforcing the idea that these individuals are in high demand. Even charity organizations use social proof to boost donations. When they list the names of previous donors or show a running total of contributions, it encourages new donors to give as well. People feel more comfortable donating when they see that others have done the same. Some organizations take it further by publicly recognizing donors, making giving feel like a social expectation. When faced with a decision, individuals often look to the actions of others to guide them, even if they wouldn't have originally made that choice. News media and advertising agencies shape public opinion by amplifying selective narratives. If a particular viewpoint is repeated often enough across multiple sources, it starts to feel like the dominant belief. This creates a sense of pressure to align with what seems like the majority opinion. Even if the actual majority holds a different perspective, the perception of widespread agreement can silence dissenting voices. This tactic is often used to push political agendas, influence consumer behavior, and control public discourse. In digital marketing, companies leverage social proof through tactics like limited stock remaining banners or X people are viewing this right now messages. These signals create urgency by making it seem like many others are interested in the same product. The reality is that these numbers are often exaggerated or entirely fabricated to push hesitant buyers into making a purchase. When people believe they might miss out on something because others are grabbing it, they act impulsively. Public figures use social proof to strengthen their reputations. Authors buy their own books in bulk to hit bestseller lists. Speakers pad their audiences with paid attendees to seem more in demand. Entrepreneurs claim exaggerated success stories to attract investors. Once someone is perceived as successful, more opportunities come their way, not because of their actual skill or achievements, but because people assume they must be worth following. This creates a self-fulfilling cycle where perception fuels real-world success. Religious and cult leaders often rely on social proof to reinforce belief systems. When individuals see a large group following a particular faith or ideology, they assume there must be truth to it. Rituals involving large crowds, public testimonials, and shared experiences all strengthen the impression that the belief is widely accepted and credible. The more people participate, the harder it becomes to question the validity of the movement. This is why many groups emphasize recruitment and visibility as core strategies. Retailers take advantage of social proof during sales events. Black Friday crowds create a frenzy, making people feel like they need to join in before missing out. Even if the deals aren't exceptional, the sight of others scrambling to buy convinces shoppers that they must act fast. The same tactic applies to online flash sales, where countdown timers and stock indicators push people into rushed decisions. Seeing others participate makes it harder to resist, even if the purchase isn't necessary. The power of social proof lies in its ability to bypass rational thinking. Instead of carefully analyzing a choice, people rely on external cues to guide them. This is why it remains one of the most effective manipulation techniques across industries and social situations. Those who understand it can shape behavior without direct coercion, simply by crafting the right perception of popularity. Negging is a psychological tactic where someone gives a backhanded compliment to lower another person's self-esteem. The goal is to create self-doubt, making the target more vulnerable to influence. This method is often used in dating, sales, and social interactions where power dynamics play a role. Imagine a situation where a man approaches a woman at a bar and says, "You're pretty cute for someone who doesn't try too hard." On the surface, it sounds like a compliment, but there's an embedded insult suggesting she doesn't put in effort. The hidden criticism makes her question herself. Is she really attractive? Does she need to try harder? This confusion makes her more likely to seek the person's approval. Negging works because it triggers a psychological response where the target unconsciously wants to prove their worth. Another common example happens in workplaces. A manager might tell an employee, "You did surprisingly well on this project." The word surprisingly implies that failure was expected. Instead of feeling accomplished, the employee may feel the need to prove their competence. This creates a subtle power imbalance, making the manager seem like the one who sets the standard for success. Negging isn't just about words. Body language and tone play a huge role. A smirk, a raised eyebrow, or an exaggerated pause can add layers to the message. Imagine someone saying, "That's a bold outfit choice," while smirking. The words alone could be neutral, but the delivery adds an air of judgment. The target is left wondering whether they should feel flattered or embarrassed. Some people use negging to create a false sense of superiority. By making someone feel slightly insecure, they position themselves as the prize. This is often seen in dating strategies where one person tries to appear desirable by making the other work for validation. If a man tells a woman, "You're not like most girls, I guess that's a good thing," it may seem like a compliment, but it also puts down other women and makes her question what makes her different. She may then feel the need to justify her uniqueness, which plays into the manipulator's hands. Salespeople sometimes use negging to make a customer doubt themselves. A car dealer might say, "Most people looking at this model have a good eye for quality." The implication is that if the customer doesn't see the value, they might not have good judgment. No one wants to feel like they're missing something, so they might become more eager to agree. In retail, a salesperson could say, "This style is for people who really know fashion." If the customer hesitates, they might feel like they don't belong to that category, prompting them to make the purchase to prove otherwise. Negging also appears in friendships and family relationships. A friend might say, "Wow, you're actually on time for once." The comment acknowledges that they arrived on time, but also implies they're usually late. Even if they didn't have an issue with punctuality before, they might now feel the need to be more conscious about it. A sibling might say, "That's a smart idea. You finally had a good one." This kind of remark makes the receiver feel like their intelligence is usually in question. One of the most damaging effects of negging is that it can wear down self-esteem over time. If someone hears backhanded compliments repeatedly, they may start to believe the negative implications. A partner who frequently says things like, "You're cute, but you'd look amazing if you lost a little weight," is conditioning their significant other to feel like they're not quite good enough. This can lead to dependence on the person giving the negs, as the target seeks approval to feel worthy. Some people use negging without realizing it. They may think they're just being playful or sarcastic, but the impact is still damaging. Others use it deliberately, especially in situations where they want control. The best way to counteract negging is to recognize it for what it is. Instead of reacting defensively or seeking approval, calling it out can shift the power dynamic. A simple response like, "Was that supposed to be a compliment?" forces the person to acknowledge their behavior. Another approach is to act indifferent, removing the reaction that the negger is looking for. When they don't get the desired response, they lose the ability to manipulate. People who use negging as a tactic often thrive on insecurity. They don't expect direct confrontation. Someone who is confident and self-assured is harder to manipulate. Understanding how negging works makes it easier to spot and avoid falling into its trap. Recognizing when someone is trying to undermine confidence is the first step in preventing their influence. Future faking is when someone makes big promises about the future to keep another person emotionally invested. They paint a picture of a dream life together, offering everything the other person wants. These promises rarely come true. The goal is not to fulfill them, but to create hope and maintain control. This tactic is common in relationships, both romantic and professional. A partner may promise marriage, kids, or financial security without any real intention of following through. An employer may dangle a promotion, pay raise, or better working conditions that never arrive. The key element is deception. The person making the promises knows they are unlikely to deliver but uses them to manipulate. A common example happens in romantic relationships. One person talks about marriage, a house, and future vacations, even picking out baby names or discussing long-term plans. The other partner believes they are building a life together. They stay in the relationship, overlooking red flags because they are focused on the future they were promised. But time passes, and those promises remain unfulfilled. Every time doubt creeps in, new promises replace the old ones. Next year, we'll get engaged. Once I finish this project, we'll travel. The future keeps moving further away, never becoming reality. In workplaces, employers use future faking to keep employees from leaving. A boss might hint at a promotion, pay increase, or exciting new responsibilities. The employee stays, working harder, hoping the reward is just around the corner. The reality is that the employer has no intention of following through. They simply want to keep the worker engaged and prevent turnover. If the employee starts to get frustrated, a new promise is introduced. "We're restructuring, but you're at the top of our list. Next quarter, we'll reassess salaries." The cycle repeats indefinitely. People who use future faking rely on their target's hope and patience. They understand that most people want stability and long-term security. They exploit this by keeping their victims focused on what could be rather than what is. The emotional investment grows over time. The more someone imagines a future, the harder it becomes to walk away. The relationship or job feels too valuable to abandon, even when reality contradicts the promises. Another way future faking works is by creating an illusion of exclusivity. In relationships, someone might claim, "I've never felt this way before," or "You're the only person I can see myself with forever." This creates a sense of rarity, making the partner feel chosen. In business, a manager might say, "You're a key part of our future plans," or "I see you running this department one day." These statements are designed to make the person feel special and committed. But without action, they are empty words. There are patterns in future faking that make it easier to spot. The promises often lack specific timelines. They are vague and flexible, allowing them to be postponed indefinitely. Instead of saying, "We will get engaged in 6 months," someone might say, "Someday, I can't wait to marry you." A company might avoid setting a clear date, saying, "We're working on your promotion," without defining a deadline. Another red flag is inconsistency. The promises change based on convenience. If someone pushes for a commitment, the response shifts. "I need more time," or "Things are complicated right now." The story evolves to prevent accountability. A person who truly intends to keep their promises does not constantly delay them or change the terms. Future faking also involves emotional highs and lows. When doubt arises, the person using this tactic amplifies the fantasy. They might suddenly express deep love or excitement about the future. A person thinking about leaving a job might receive a sudden email praising their work, giving them hope again. The goal is to prevent the victim from walking away. Many people fall into the trap of future faking because they want to believe. The idea of a happy future is powerful. The brain fills in gaps, imagining details that make the dream even more compelling. The longer someone waits, the harder it becomes to accept the truth. Walking away feels like giving up on something valuable, even if it never existed in the first place. This form of manipulation is especially damaging because it drains time and energy. People put effort into relationships or jobs that will never give back what they promised. Years can pass before someone realizes they have been misled. The emotional impact can be severe, leading to self-doubt and regret. Victims may blame themselves for not seeing the signs sooner. Escaping future faking requires recognizing the pattern. Promises should be judged by actions, not words. If a commitment keeps getting delayed, it's worth questioning why. Asking for clear timelines can expose deception. If someone avoids specifics or reacts negatively to accountability, they may be using future faking. Another important step is trusting instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. A consistent pattern of broken promises is not an accident. It is a deliberate strategy to keep someone hooked. The best way to break free is to focus on reality. Instead of waiting for a future that never arrives, assess what exists in the present. If the relationship or job is not fulfilling now, the chances of it improving later are slim. Understanding future faking helps people protect themselves. When faced with big promises, it's important to look for proof. Genuine intentions show up in consistent effort and follow-through. If someone truly wants a future with you, they will take steps to build it rather than just talk about it. Time pressure manipulation works by forcing people to make quick decisions before they can think things through. When someone feels rushed, they are more likely to rely on instinct rather than logic. This makes them easier to manipulate. A classic example is the high-pressure sales tactic. A car dealer might say, "This deal is only good for today," even if they know the offer won't change. The customer, fearing they'll miss out, makes a snap decision. If given more time, they might research, compare options, or even realize they don't need a new car at all. Another example is seen in negotiations. A boss might hand an employee a contract and say, "I need your decision by the end of the meeting." The pressure forces the employee to accept terms they wouldn't agree to otherwise. Given more time, they could have consulted a lawyer or negotiated better pay. But under pressure, they feel trapped. This tactic also plays out in personal relationships. A controlling partner might push for quick commitments. They might say, "If you don't move in with me now, I'll assume you're not serious." The person being pressured may not be ready, but they fear losing the relationship. Instead of making a thoughtful decision, they agree to something they later regret. In emergencies, time pressure is sometimes unavoidable. Doctors must make fast decisions when a patient is in critical condition. Firefighters act without hesitation in a burning building. But outside of true emergencies, manufactured urgency is a manipulation tactic. It creates stress, limits options, and forces rushed decisions. Marketers use this strategy constantly. Flash sales, countdown timers, and limited-time offers create artificial urgency. An online store might say, "Only 2 left in stock," even when they have hundreds. The goal is to make the shopper act fast before thinking rationally. Once the purchase is made, the pressure disappears. Politicians also use time pressure to push agendas. A lawmaker might say, "We must pass this bill now, or disaster will strike." The The public and other lawmakers feel rushed. They don't have time to read the fine print or consider alternatives. Later, they may regret their decision, but by then, it's too late. A famous historical example occurred in the early 2000s when world leaders pushed for military action, saying there was no time for debate. Decisions were made quickly, and only later did people realize the consequences. Many policies throughout history have been rushed through under the banner of urgency. Even social situations can involve time pressure manipulation. A friend might say, "We need to leave now," when they really mean, "I don't want to wait for you." By imposing a deadline, they remove your choice. In reality, there's often more time than they suggest. This tactic works because people dislike missing out. The fear of regret pushes them to act. Scarcity, real or fake, makes something seem more valuable. People also dislike uncertainty. A quick decision gives closure, even if it's not the best choice. There are ways to defend against this manipulation. The first is recognizing it. If someone is rushing you, ask yourself why. Are they genuinely in a hurry, or are they trying to prevent you from thinking? Another strategy is pushing back. If a salesperson says, "This deal expires today," respond with, "Then I'll wait for the next one." If an employer says, "You must decide now," reply with, "I need time to review this properly." These responses put you back in control. Pausing is another powerful defense. Even a short break allows rational thought. If pressured to make a decision, step away. Say, "I need a moment to think." This small action breaks the manipulator's control. Asking questions is also effective. Instead of accepting a rushed offer, ask, "Why does this need to be decided so quickly?" If they struggle to give a real answer, you know they're creating artificial urgency. Writing things down can help. If faced with a rushed decision, list the pros and cons. Seeing options on paper makes it harder to fall for emotional pressure. It also forces logic back into the process. Having a default rule for rushed decisions is useful. For example, decide that you will never commit to anything major without at least 24 hours to think. If someone tries to push, simply say, "I don't make important decisions on the spot." Group settings can make time pressure worse. When everyone around you is making quick choices, it's easy to follow along. Recognizing this helps. If others are rushing, it doesn't mean you have to. Parents sometimes use this tactic on children. A parent might say, "If you don't choose now, you get nothing." This forces the child to decide without thinking. While this can sometimes teach decision-making skills, it can also instill anxiety. A better approach might be, take a moment and think before you choose. In business, time pressure is often intentional. Companies want employees to make fast decisions, especially in high-stakes environments. But even in these settings, taking time often leads to better results. Rushed decisions may seem efficient, but can cause bigger problems later. Time pressure manipulation is effective because it plays on basic human psychology. People want certainty, they fear loss, they dislike indecision. But the best choices are rarely made in a panic. Recognizing and resisting this tactic puts control back where it belongs, with the person making the decision. Creating dependency is a powerful manipulation tactic that makes someone emotionally, financially, or psychologically reliant on another person. When someone falls into this trap, they begin to believe they cannot function without the manipulator. This strategy is often used in toxic relationships, cults, workplaces, and even politics. The goal is to strip away a person's sense of independence so they feel trapped and unable to leave. Imagine a relationship where one partner gradually takes control over every aspect of the other's life. At first, it seems harmless. They insist on paying for dinner, handling bills, and making major decisions. Over time, the dependent partner stops questioning these things. They get used to the idea that their needs are being taken care of. Eventually, they lose the ability or the confidence to make choices for themselves. When they do try, they are met with subtle pushback. "I'll take care of it, don't worry," or "You don't need to stress about that, I've got it handled." What begins as kindness turns into control. The dependent person now lacks financial knowledge, problem-solving skills, or even basic decision-making confidence. Emotional dependency works in a similar way. A manipulator may convince someone that no one else will ever understand them the way they do. They might use phrases like, "No one else cares about you like I do," or "you wouldn't survive without me." By isolating them from friends and family, they ensure that their target has nowhere to turn. They create a world where the dependent person feels alone except for them. Slowly, their self-worth becomes tied to the manipulator's approval. They hesitate to make any decision without checking in first. This tactic is also common in workplaces. A boss may keep an employee in a constant state of uncertainty. One day, they praise their work, making them feel valuable. The next, they criticize them harshly, making them feel inadequate. Over time, the employee becomes desperate for approval. They stay late, take on extra work, and never ask for a raise because they fear losing their job. The boss fosters this dependency by making them feel irreplaceable yet insecure. "You're lucky to have this job," they might say, or "no one else would give you this opportunity." The employee stays, not because they love the job, but because they are afraid to leave. Financial dependency is one of the most effective forms of control. When one person holds all the financial power in a relationship, they control the future of the other. A husband who refuses to let his wife work, a parent who withholds money from an adult child, or an employer who pays just enough to survive but not enough to save. These are all ways to create financial dependency. The longer someone stays in this situation, the harder it becomes to escape. They lack resources, credit history, or the knowledge to manage money on their own. A parent might create dependency in a child by never allowing them to solve their own problems. If a child never learns how to handle failure, manage money, or make difficult choices, they will grow up believing they can't survive without their parents. This dependency carries into adulthood, where they struggle to make decisions or take risks. They may feel incapable of living on their own or maintaining relationships without parental approval. In romantic relationships, dependency is often reinforced through small acts that seem caring at first. A partner may insist on driving everywhere, handling every bill, or making every decision. "You don't need to worry about it," they say. Over time, the other partner stops questioning things. They lose confidence in their ability to make choices. Then, when they do try to take control, they are met with doubt. "Are you sure you can handle that?" Or, "I don't think that's a good idea." This constant undermining makes the dependent partner feel incompetent. They start believing they truly need their partner to function. Cult leaders use dependency to maintain control over followers. They provide food, shelter, and emotional validation, but only under strict conditions. Members become convinced they cannot survive outside the group. They are cut off from friends and family, making them even more reliant on the leader. The longer they stay, the harder it becomes to leave. Fear replaces logic. Even if they sense something is wrong, they doubt their ability to survive on their own. Politicians and governments can also foster dependency. Welfare programs, while often necessary, can be used as a tool for control. When people rely on the government for food, housing, or medical care, they become more likely to comply with policies they might otherwise question. This isn't always intentional, but in corrupt systems, it is a way to keep people dependent on those in power. Creating dependency is a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. It starts with small, seemingly kind gestures. Over time, these acts remove a person's ability to think or act for themselves. Once they reach that point, they no longer see a way out. Even if they recognize the manipulation, they feel powerless to change their situation. The fear of the unknown becomes stronger than the discomfort of their current reality. Someone who has fallen into this trap may not even realize it. They might justify their dependency by saying, "They just want to take care of me," or "I wouldn't know what to do without them." The thought of independence feels overwhelming. They may believe they aren't smart enough, strong enough, or skilled enough to survive on their own. That belief isn't real. It was planted there by the manipulator. A person who wants to create dependency will often test boundaries early on. They might offer to handle a small responsibility, like paying for a meal or running an errand. If the other person accepts, they gradually take on more control. Before long, they have woven themselves into every part of their target's life. By the time the victim notices, it feels too late to break free. For someone trapped in this cycle, the first step is recognizing it. Dependency thrives in secrecy. Once it is exposed, it loses power. A person must start making small, independent choices. They might open a bank account, take a class, or reconnect with an old friend. Every small step chips away at the illusion that they need the manipulator to survive. The most effective way to prevent dependency is to build self-reliance from the beginning. Teaching children how to solve problems, handle money, and make decisions ensures they grow into independent adults. In relationships, maintaining personal finances, friendships, and hobbies prevents one person from having complete control over the other. A manipulator thrives on control. Their greatest fear is losing it. The moment someone realizes they do not need the manipulator, the power dynamic shifts. The dependent person may feel fear, doubt, or even guilt for trying to regain independence. But those emotions are temporary. The moment they take control of their own life, the illusion of dependency shatters. The pity play is a psychological trick where someone uses sadness and vulnerability to manipulate others. They act as though they are suffering to gain sympathy and shift blame. This tactic is often used to avoid consequences, gain favors, or keep people emotionally invested in a relationship. Imagine a scenario where someone borrows money and never pays it back. When confronted, they don't apologize or offer to repay. Instead, they talk about how hard their life has been. They mention their struggles, how they barely have enough for food, or how they recently had a terrible argument with a loved one. They paint a picture of suffering so strong that the person they owe starts feeling guilty for even asking. Instead of demanding their money back, they offer more help. The manipulator gets what they want without fulfilling their obligation. Another example is in relationships. A partner who repeatedly breaks promises or behaves poorly may use the pity play to escape accountability. Instead of addressing their actions, they shift the focus to their own pain. If they are caught lying, they might start crying and say they've had a tough childhood, claiming they struggle with trust issues. If they are confronted about mistreatment, they may talk about their depression or past trauma. They divert attention from their wrongdoing and make the other person feel guilty for bringing it up. The pity play works because people are naturally inclined to help those in distress. Most people don't like to see others suffer. They feel uncomfortable causing more pain, even when holding someone accountable. Manipulators exploit this instinct. They know that if they make themselves look weak enough, others will hesitate to push back. They turn the situation around so that instead of being seen as the one causing harm, they become the victim. Parents sometimes use this tactic on their children. A mother who wants her child to visit more often might say, "I guess I'll just be alone forever. No one cares about me." She isn't directly asking the child to come over, but she's implying that their absence is causing her pain. The child, feeling guilty, may change their plans and visit. The mother gets what she wants without having to ask outright. In workplaces, the pity play can be used to avoid responsibilities. An employee who misses deadlines might not own up to their poor time management. Instead, they talk about how overwhelmed they are. They mention their personal struggles, how much pressure they're under, or how sick they've been feeling. A boss or coworker might feel sorry for them and decide not to hold them accountable. Over time, this kind of manipulation can lead to an unfair workload distribution, with responsible employees picking up the slack while the manipulator continues to use excuses. Friendships can also be affected by the pity play. Imagine a friend who constantly cancels plans the last minute. When confronted, they don't apologize. Instead, they talk about how they've been feeling down lately, how nothing seems to be going right for them, or how they've been dealing with stress. The focus shifts from their unreliability to their suffering. The friend who was initially upset now feels guilty for even bringing it up. They offer support instead of expressing their frustration. The manipulator successfully avoids responsibility while keeping their friend invested in the relationship. This tactic is also common in abusive relationships. An abuser may use the pity play to keep their victim from leaving. If their partner tries to end the relationship, they might say things like, "If you leave, I don't know what I'll do," or "You're the only good thing in my life." The victim, feeling responsible for the abuser's well-being, may stay even when they know they should leave. The abuser uses emotional blackmail. making the victim feel like they are the cause of their suffering. Public figures sometimes use the pity play when caught in scandals. Instead of addressing their wrongdoing directly, they highlight their personal struggles. A politician accused of corruption may talk about how hard their job is, how much stress they've been under, or how unfair the media has been to them. A celebrity caught in a controversy might give an emotional interview where they cry about how the pressure of fame has affected their mental health. By shifting the focus to their suffering, they try to make the public forget about their actions and instead feel sorry for them. One reason the pity play is so effective is that it puts people in a moral dilemma. If they hold the manipulator accountable, they feel like they're being cruel to someone who is already suffering. But if they let things slide, they enable bad behavior. The manipulator counts on the fact that most people would rather avoid confrontation than risk looking heartless. People who frequently use the pity play tend to have certain patterns. They often avoid taking responsibility for their actions. When confronted, they don't explain or apologize. They deflect. They make every issue about their suffering, turning themselves into the victim, no matter what the situation is. They often exaggerate their struggles, making things seem worse than they are. They may even fabricate hardships to gain sympathy. While some people use the pity play intentionally, others may do it unconsciously. They may have learned this behavior as a survival mechanism. If they grew up in an environment where taking responsibility led to punishment, they might have developed the habit of shifting blame to avoid consequences. If they found that playing the victim got them what they wanted, they may have continued using it in adulthood. Defending against this tactic requires emotional awareness. Recognizing when someone is shifting focus from their actions to their suffering is the first step. The key is to separate genuine hardship from manipulation. People can go through difficult times and still be accountable for their actions. If someone always has an excuse or always makes themselves the victim, that's a red flag. A useful approach is to acknowledge their feelings, but still maintain boundaries. If someone borrows money and doesn't return it, saying, "I understand you're going through a tough time, but I still need the money back," keeps the focus on the issue without dismissing their struggles. If a friend frequently cancels plans and then plays the victim, responding with, "I'm sorry you're feeling that way, but I also feel disappointed when my plans are ignored," keeps the conversation balanced. Another strategy is to avoid falling into the guilt trap. Just because someone expresses sadness doesn't mean you are responsible for fixing it. If someone uses the pity play to avoid consequences, it's okay to hold them accountable. Setting clear boundaries and sticking to them prevents manipulators from taking advantage. People who use the pity play often rely on others feeling uncomfortable with conflict. They depend on guilt and sympathy to control situations. Understanding this tactic makes it easier to spot and resist. It allows people to navigate interactions without being manipulated into taking responsibility for someone else's actions. Loss aversion exploitation works by making people fear losing something more than they value gaining it. This psychological trick takes advantage of a natural tendency. People feel the pain of losing something far more intensely than they feel the joy of gaining something of equal value. That fear of loss influences their choices and behavior in powerful ways. Imagine a salesperson offering a free trial of an expensive service. Once the trial period ends, they remind the customer that if they cancel, they will lose access to all the premium features they've been using. The customer, even if they didn't originally plan to buy, now hesitates. They have already enjoyed the benefits and fear losing them. That fear drives them to continue paying, even if they never intended to in the first place. Marketers, businesses, and even personal relationships use this trick all the time. A limited time offer is a classic example. A website might tell you that a discount is only available for the next 10 minutes. The clock counts down, making you anxious. The fear of missing out overrides your logical thinking, and you rush to buy something you might not even need. The same happens with airline tickets. A website tells you, "Only 3 seats left at this price." The pressure builds. Instead of thinking rationally, you book immediately because you don't want to lose the opportunity. Relationships also use loss aversion to manipulate emotions. Someone might say, "If you leave, you'll never find someone who cares about you as much as I do." The fear of losing security or affection clouds judgment. The person stays, even if they are unhappy, because the risk of losing what they have feels too great. In the workplace, loss aversion keeps people in jobs they dislike. A manager might remind an employee that if they leave, they will lose their benefits, their seniority, and their stability. Even if another job offers better pay or more growth, the fear of losing the known keeps them from taking the risk. Another variation of this trick appears in gambling. Casinos design their games so that players always feel like they are close to winning. A near miss triggers the feeling that victory is just around the corner. When someone wins a little, they don't want to leave because they don't want to lose their winnings. They keep playing, afraid that walking away means giving up on potential earnings. Investors also fall into this trap. Someone holding a stock that is losing value might refuse to sell because selling would mean locking in the loss. Instead, they hold on to it, hoping it will recover. The longer they wait, the more they risk losing, but the psychological attachment keeps them from making the rational choice. Retailers structure pricing around this fear. A store might raise the price of an item and then offer a special discount for a short time. The price goes back to normal later, but customers see it as a loss if they don't buy immediately. The urgency creates an emotional response, and people purchase impulsively. Real estate agents use this technique to close deals faster. A potential buyer might express interest in a house, but hesitate. The agent then tells them another buyer is ready to make an offer. The fear of losing the house pushes them to act, even if they weren't completely sure before. Credit card companies use loss aversion in rewards programs. They offer points or cash back, but if a customer doesn't spend enough, they lose potential rewards. This encourages unnecessary spending. The thought of leaving money on the table makes people act against their better financial judgment. Even social media platforms exploit this trick. If someone stops using an app, they receive notifications reminding them of what they are missing. Your friends haven't heard from you in a while. The platform makes them feel like they are losing social connections by not engaging. This subtle pressure draws them back in. Gyms use the same approach. Many people sign up for memberships with good intentions, but after a few months they stop going. Instead of canceling, they keep paying because canceling feels like admitting failure. The money already spent feels like an investment, and they don't want to lose that investment, even though they aren't using the service. Another common example is warranties and insurance. Companies sell these by focusing on potential losses rather than benefits. A salesperson might say, "Without this extended warranty, you could be stuck with a huge repair bill." The fear of an unexpected expense pushes people to spend more than necessary. Even governments use loss aversion to influence behavior. A tax policy might offer rebates to people who follow certain rules. Instead of rewarding good behavior, they frame it as a penalty for not complying. People work harder to avoid losses than to gain benefits, so this approach increases compliance. In negotiations, skilled professionals use this principle to their advantage. A car dealer might let a potential buyer test drive a car and take it home for a night. Once the buyer has spent time with it, they feel a sense of ownership. Giving it up now feels like a loss. The next day, they are far more likely to buy it. Subscription services rely on this trick as well. Free trials, introductory offers, and exclusive content all create a sense of ownership. Once people get used to having something, they feel they are losing it if they cancel. This psychological pressure keeps them subscribed longer than they originally intended. Even personal habits are affected by loss aversion. A fitness tracker might show daily progress streaks. If someone misses a day, they lose their streak. That small loss feels bigger than the actual impact of missing a workout, so they keep going to avoid the emotional discomfort. Teachers use this concept in education. Instead of saying, "If you study, you will earn points," they frame it as, "If you don't study, you will lose points." The fear of losing something already earned motivates students more than the promise of gaining something new. This trick also shows up in parenting. Instead of telling a child, "If you clean your room, you get extra TV time," a A parent might say, "If you don't clean your room, you lose TV privileges." The latter approach is more effective because the child perceives the loss as more significant. Even self-improvement relies on this principle. Many people start a new habit because they fear losing progress. A writer who commits to writing every day feels the pressure not to break the streak. The fear of regression is a stronger motivator than the hope of improvement. Understanding how loss aversion works helps people recognize when they are being manipulated. It allows them to make better decisions by stepping back and asking whether their choices are based on real value or just fear of losing something. Shifting goalposts happens when someone keeps changing expectations so the other person never feels good enough. It's a manipulative tactic that keeps people feeling inadequate, always trying but never succeeding. No matter what they do, the target of this behavior finds the rules changing just when they think they have met them. This constant shift leads to exhaustion, frustration, and a loss of self-confidence. Imagine a workplace where a manager asks an employee to finish a project by Friday. The employee works late hours and completes the task on time, only for the manager to say that the project also needs additional research and a more detailed analysis. When that is provided, the manager now wants a new presentation to be included. No matter how much the employee does, the requirements keep shifting, making success impossible. Over time, the employee begins to feel incompetent, even though they have done everything right. This is a common way shifting goalposts appear in professional environments. In relationships, this tactic can be even more damaging. A person might tell their partner that they need to be more affectionate. When the partner makes an effort to show more affection, they are then told they aren't spontaneous enough. When they work on spontaneity, they are told they should be more serious. No matter what they change, there is always something else that isn't quite right. The person on the receiving end keeps adjusting, hoping to meet expectations, but those expectations keep moving. This creates a feeling of constant inadequacy, making them feel like they are always one step behind. Parents sometimes use shifting goalposts with their children, often without realizing how harmful it can be. A child might be praised for getting good grades, but when they finally achieve an A, they are told that they should have gotten an A+. When they bring home an A+, they are told they should be involved in more extracurricular activities. Each achievement is met with another, higher expectation, making the child feel as if they are never good enough. Over time, this can lead to deep feelings of insecurity and anxiety about failure. Shifting goalposts can also appear in friendships. One friend might constantly change their expectations about what it means to be a good friend. They might say they need more support, so the other friend makes an effort to be there. But then they say they feel smothered and need more space. When the other friend gives them space, they complain about feeling abandoned. The friendship turns into a constant guessing game where one person never knows what will make the other happy. This tactic is also used in debates and arguments to avoid conceding a point. A person might demand evidence to support an argument, but when presented with that evidence, they ask for even more proof or change the conditions of what would be considered acceptable evidence. This ensures they never have to admit they were wrong, and it frustrates their opponent into giving up. In political or ideological debates, shifting goalposts is a way to keep an argument going indefinitely without ever addressing the original issue. Over time, shifting goalposts can have serious psychological effects. The person experiencing it starts to feel like no matter what they do, it will never be enough. They may begin to doubt their abilities and self-worth. In some cases, this can lead to anxiety, depression, or a sense of learned helplessness, where they stop trying altogether because they believe success is impossible. This manipulation is often combined with other tactics like gaslighting, where a person is made to question their own reality. When someone points out that the goalposts keep moving, the manipulator might respond by saying they are imagining it or being too sensitive. This adds to the confusion and makes it even harder for the target to recognize what is happening. Defending against shifting goalposts requires recognizing the pattern early. One effective way is to document expectations clearly. In a workplace, this might mean getting instructions in writing so there is a record of what was initially agreed upon. In relationships or friendships, setting clear boundaries about what is reasonable can help prevent the constant shifting of expectations. Asking for specific definitions can also be useful. If someone keeps changing their expectations, asking them to define exactly what they want and sticking to it can make it harder for them to keep moving the target. Another way to counter this tactic is to call it out directly. A person might say, "When I met the last request, you changed it again. What exactly do you want from me?" This puts the manipulator in a position where they have to acknowledge their shifting demands. If they refuse to acknowledge it, that is a strong sign they are intentionally using this tactic. Setting personal boundaries is also essential. When someone recognizes that they are being manipulated this way, they can decide how much effort they are willing to invest. Understanding that they are not the problem, that the shifting expectations are designed to keep them feeling inadequate, can be empowering. Instead of constantly adjusting, they can choose to walk away or disengage from the situation. Shifting goalposts are designed to create frustration and self-doubt. The more a person recognizes when it is happening, the better they can protect themselves. It is important to trust one's own judgment and to remember that if expectations keep changing, the problem isn't a lack of effort. It is a deliberate tactic designed to keep them chasing something that will never be within reach. Bad cop, good cop is a psychological tactic where one person acts aggressively while another appears understanding. The harsh one creates fear, and the kind one offers a way out. This contrast pressures the target into compliance. The technique is common in police interrogations, negotiations, and even workplace dynamics. Imagine a suspect in an interrogation room. One officer storms in, slamming a file on the table. His voice is sharp. He accuses the suspect of lying, threatening long prison time. The suspect shrinks under pressure. Then another officer enters. This one is calm, almost friendly. He offers a way out, saying things don't have to be difficult. He presents a confession as the easiest solution. The suspect, shaken by the first officer, clings to the second officer's apparent kindness. Under this stress, he is more likely to confess, even if he isn't guilty. In negotiations, this tactic is just as effective. A customer wants a refund for a defective product. The first representative is cold. He refuses the refund, citing company policy. The customer grows frustrated. Then another representative steps in. This one is sympathetic. She bends the rules to offer a partial refund. The customer, compared to the initial rejection, feels relieved. They accept the partial refund, believing they got a fair deal. The contrast between the two representatives makes the second one seem reasonable, even when the outcome isn't ideal. Employers use this technique to control employees. A manager criticizes an employee harshly during a performance review. He lists every mistake, making the employee feel incompetent. The employee becomes anxious about job security. Then, another manager steps in, offering a solution. He suggests extra training or a temporary demotion instead of firing. The employee, relieved to avoid job loss, accepts conditions they might have refused under normal circumstances. This method also appears in relationships. One parent might be strict, enforcing rules harshly. The other parent appears more lenient, offering comfort after punishments. The child learns to go to the nice parent for favors, unknowingly falling into a control dynamic. The contrast makes the strict parent's authority seem absolute, while the lenient parent's kindness gains the child's trust. In sales, a pushy salesperson might reject a customer's budget outright, making them feel their expectations are unrealistic. Then, a second salesperson offers a special deal. The customer, feeling like they are getting an exception, is more likely to accept a price higher than they originally intended. The bad cop, good cop tactic is effective because it manipulates emotions. The target experiences fear or distress from one person, then relief from another. This emotional contrast makes the target more willing to comply with the second person's suggestion. The stress from the bad cop lowers resistance, making the good cop seem like a savior. This method can be subtle. It doesn't always involve shouting or overt aggression. A job interviewer might express doubt about a candidate's skills, making them feel inadequate. Then another interviewer reassures the candidate, offering a lower salary than expected. The candidate, desperate to regain approval, might accept the lower offer. Another variation happens in social circles. A group might initially exclude a new member, making them feel unwanted. Later, one member welcomes them, making them grateful for acceptance. This tactic conditions people to seek approval from specific individuals. Some people use this technique naturally, without planning it. Others use it deliberately to gain power. Recognizing it is key to resisting its influence. The tactic works because the victim focuses on the relief offered by the good cop instead of questioning the situation as a whole. When faced with this strategy, stepping back and analyzing the bigger picture reduces its power. Deliberate insecurity creation is a powerful and often destructive psychological tactic. It works by making someone doubt themselves, their abilities, or their worth, so they become easier to control. People who use this tactic often do it gradually, making the target question their own competence over time. They may use subtle comments, comparisons, or outright criticism to plant seeds of doubt. Once insecurity takes root, the target starts seeking validation from the manipulator, giving them more power in the relationship. A common way to create insecurity is through constant criticism disguised as helpful feedback. The manipulator might point out small flaws that the target never noticed before. They may make remarks like, "You always seem to struggle with that," or "I don't think you're as good at this as you think you are." These statements make the target second-guess their skills and abilities. When this happens frequently, the person starts internalizing these doubts. They begin to believe they are inadequate, making them more dependent on the manipulator for reassurance. Another approach is shifting expectations so the target never feels like they are good enough. The manipulator may set a goal and then change the standards once the target reaches it. If someone works hard to meet expectations, the manipulator will claim they misunderstood or didn't go far enough. This makes the target feel like they are constantly failing, no matter what they do. They stay trapped in a cycle of trying harder, never realizing that the rules are designed to keep them feeling inadequate. Some people create insecurity by using comparison. They will constantly mention how others are better, smarter, or more successful. They might say, "I wish you were more like them," or "They handled that so much better than you." These comments make the target feel like they are always falling short. Even if they are capable and talented, they begin to feel like they are not good enough. This weakens their self-confidence, making them more likely to rely on the manipulator for guidance or approval. Subtle insults and backhanded compliments are also common tactics. The manipulator may say things like, "You're actually pretty smart for someone like you," or "That's not bad, considering your experience." These statements seem like compliments, but actually reinforce self-doubt. The target starts to wonder if they are really competent or if they have just been lucky so far. This uncertainty keeps them seeking approval and validation from the person controlling them. Insecurity can also be created by making someone question their own perception of reality. This is a form of gaslighting where the manipulator denies things that happened or twists the truth. If the target brings up something hurtful that was said, the manipulator might respond, "I never said that," or "You're too sensitive." Over time, this makes the person doubt their own memory and judgment. They start to rely on the manipulator's version of events instead of trusting themselves. Another strategy is withholding approval or affection as a form of control. The manipulator gives praise or love only when it serves their purpose. When the target does something right, they may receive a small amount of approval, but it is never consistent. The moment they step out of line, the manipulator withdraws warmth and becomes cold or distant. This creates anxiety and makes the target work harder to earn back affection. It keeps them trapped in a state of trying to prove themselves, always seeking validation. People who use deliberate insecurity creation often disguise their tactics as concern or constructive criticism. They might say, "I'm just trying to help you," or "I want you to be the best version of yourself." This makes it harder for the target to recognize the manipulation. They may believe the criticism is well-intended and that they really do need to improve. The more they try to meet the manipulator's impossible standards, the more insecure they become. Some manipulators use insecurity to isolate their target from sources of confidence and support. They might discourage friendships, belittle family members, or make the person feel like no one else understands them. If the target expresses self-doubt to someone else, the manipulator might say, "They don't really know you like I do," or "They're just jealous of you." This creates a sense of dependence, where the target feels like the manipulator is the only person who truly sees them. The more isolated they become, the more they rely on the manipulator for validation. Workplaces can also be a breeding ground for insecurity creation. A manipulative boss or coworker might undermine someone's confidence by constantly questioning their decisions. They might say, "Are you sure about that?" or "I don't think you're ready for this yet." These statements make the person feel like they are not capable of handling their responsibilities. Over time, they may become more hesitant to take initiative or make decisions, allowing the manipulator to maintain control over them. Romantic relationships often involve this tactic when one partner wants to maintain dominance over the other. A controlling partner might make their significant other feel unattractive or unworthy of love. They may say things like, "You're lucky to have me," or "No one else would put up with you." These statements create fear and insecurity, making the person less likely to leave. They begin to believe that they are not good enough for anyone else, trapping them in the relationship. Parents can also unknowingly create insecurity in their children. Constantly pointing out flaws, comparing siblings, or setting impossible standards can make a child feel like they will never be good enough. A parent who says, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" or "You always mess things up," is planting the seeds of lifelong self-doubt. Children raised this way often grow up with deep insecurities that affect their relationships, careers, and self-esteem. Even in friendships, deliberate insecurity creation can occur. A so-called friend might use put-downs disguised as jokes. They may say things like, "You're so awkward, it's funny," or "I can't believe you got that job, you must have been lucky." These comments make the person feel like they are never quite measuring up. They begin to question their own worth and seek approval from the friend, who continues to reinforce their insecurity. Social media has made insecurity creation easier than ever. People compare themselves to carefully curated images of others, making them feel inadequate. Manipulative individuals take advantage of this by highlighting others' successes while downplaying their target's achievements. They may say, "Everyone else is doing so much better than you," or "You should be further along by now." This makes the target feel like they are constantly behind, fueling their insecurity. Deliberate insecurity creation is a form of control that can be difficult to recognize because it happens gradually. The target may not even realize they are being manipulated until they have lost confidence in themselves. They start to believe they are not capable, smart, or attractive enough. They become reliant on the manipulator for validation, making it harder to break free from their influence. Understanding this tactic is important because it allows people to recognize when it is happening to them. It helps them identify the small, seemingly harmless comments that chip away at their confidence. Once they see the pattern, they can begin to rebuild their self-esteem and take back control.